everything that they can to mobilise support for those people. But I will draw his attention to ministers and see whether a statement, an update to the House is due.
New picture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can we have one, Dad? That was the iconic slogan from the Yorkshire Caravans back in the 1980s. I'm sure the Leader of the House won't quite remember back then when that was said. I wonder if you'd join me, though, in congratulating them on achieving their 100th birthday, a huge milestone for a local business in Bawtry, in Doncaster East and the Isle of Axholme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my honourable friend for bringing this matter to the House. And of course, I want to congratulate Yorkshire Caravan on 100 years in business. Businesses such as these are the cornerstone of the local economy, and their longevity only proves their worth and contribution, and the product that they produce, as he says, produces lifetime memories for lots of people.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A wheelchair-using constituent has contacted me after a major manufacturer and dealership refused to apply the VAT relief available to eligible disabled people purchasing adapted vehicles. And there seems to be a perception within parts of the industry that the rules are complex and that dealerships bear a risk if the relief is applied incorrectly. And that may be discouraging legitimate disabled people from getting the vehicles they deserve. Could I ask the Leader of the House if we could have a statement from the Minister on this issue to clarify how the rules should work so that my disabled constituents can acquire the vehicle that they need?
VAT relief on adapted vehicles is a really important matter, and the Right Honourable Gentleman, as ever, raises it in the proper way. However complex these matters are, it is important that businesses do the right thing, and therefore getting that understanding between business and government is very important. I will raise it with the relevant minister. I'll make sure that he gets an update on this matter.
Tony Anton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Beer Group, this time last week I was in a lot of pain. I was pedalling to pubs in Norfolk and was probably just outside Norwich at this time, or maybe somewhere nearby. But this week, pedalling to pubs, came to Parliament, and they've raised over £130,000 for two really brilliant charities, only a pavement away, on the licensed trade charity that support the beer and pub industry. Would the Leader of the House join me in congratulating the riders, the support team, the members in this House that supported me financially to do the silly act that I did, but also Ben McCarthy, an inspirational Down syndrome young man, and his mum, who absolutely smashed it and really showed me what it means to be committed and to support our pub industry.
Mr. Speaker, pedalling to pubs, I'm delighted to join my honourable friend in thanking them and offering them our congratulations. It's an incredible amount of money, and every individual has been concerned with that. And of course, local pubs are very important indeed, which is why the government is trying to do everything that we can to support them. But I certainly think pedalling to pubs deserves our congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hundreds of my constituents have been left bitterly disappointed by the government's recent announcement cancelling the later stages of Project Gigabit. Chichester received not a single completed upgrade from the project, and all households and businesses that were due to benefit were included in the later stages of the scheme. As a result, they've now missed out entirely. So will the Leader of the House arrange an urgent meeting between myself and the relevant minister in DSIT so I can discuss what will be done for these residents?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I understand the Honourable Lady and her constituents' concern on this matter, and I will seek to arrange the meeting that she asks for.
Next Bill.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the government's ongoing commitment to supporting and delivering fairness for our veterans? Can I ask the Leader of the House if we may please have a statement from the Veterans Minister on reducing processing times for War Pension Scheme claims? My constituent, Denzel Hancock, an 88-year-old nuclear test veteran, continues to await a decision.
Mr. Speaker, it's appropriate that my honourable friend should raise this matter on Armed Forces Week, but again, we should be looking to support veterans every week of the year, not just this week. I will raise his specific concerns with the relevant Defence Minister and see what further action can be taken to get rid of these delays.
Good fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been contacted by a constituent in Biggin Hill who is deeply concerned that schools are not made aware when individuals who've been charged with child sexual offences are living in close proximity to the school. Now, I appreciate that you have to balance safeguarding with legal and privacy issues, but surely making the schools aware makes sense. Could we have a debate in this place on community safeguarding?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman raises a really important point, but also he rightly acknowledges that it is a question of balance, but a balance in which the safety of children, of course, is paramount. He may wish to seek, Mr. Speaker, an adjournment debate or a Westminster Hall debate so that he can make his case, because I'm sure it will be shared. His concerns will be shared by a number of colleagues across the House.
Mr. Speaker, in Brent, Woodfield School, the staff at Woodfield School, the support staff, are facing a cut in hours, which equates to about £4,000 cut in their wages, and the school suggesting that they fire and rehire them. They are currently on strike. The NEU are trying to negotiate to save services and to save terms and conditions and jobs. Will the Leader of the House support me in looking at SEND funding and ensure that it does not jeopardise the care of the children, but also the support staff terms and conditions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure this is of real concern to my honourable friend's constituents, and she knows very well the government's position on fire and rehire. On the question of funding SEND properly, she will know that we are committed to that, but if there are instances where this is having a real detrimental effect in local areas, I can arrange for a meeting with the relevant minister for her.
Robert Jenrick.
Tax-free ISAs are tax-free. It's a very simple principle. It's existed for 30 years. It's why 22 million people in our country invested their savings in them, 40% of the adult population. And yet, in the final act of the Chancellor, she's decided to slap a 22% tax on cash in stocks and shares ISAs. Is there nothing that she doesn't want to tax? Does the Chancellor intend to come to Parliament and account for her actions, or can we have a debate on this in the name of the 22 million savers in this country who are being let down?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reality of the situation here is very simple. I'm surprised the right honourable gentleman doesn't understand that. The new cash ISA limit introduced by the Chancellor at the budget in 2025 will help to encourage retail investment and drive better returns for savers. We're confident that we struck the right balance between supporting normal investor behaviour while preventing routes to replicate a higher cash ISA allowance within stocks and shares and innovative finance ISAs. The new charge is aimed at deterring long-term holding of cash in ISAs that should be used for investment. We've designed the rules to be as simple as possible, to maintain maximum flexibility for savers, to make sure that an investment portfolio works for them. But normal investor behaviour, such as holding cash in a non-cash ISA prior to investment, will not be prevented by the introduction of the tax changes.
Joe Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Leader of the House join me in commending the fantastic parliamentary staff in Westminster and in constituencies across the UK? They keep MPs' offices running, yet being employed by 650 separate offices rather than by Parliament itself leaves them without consistent terms or, in some cases, proper support. That's what the GMB, the largest union in Parliament and, for the record, my union, is working to fix through its One Parliament, One Employer campaign. Will he join me in encouraging other members to back their proposal?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for bringing this to the attention of the House. He's right to recognise the incredible work done by our staff in Westminster and across the UK. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that there are a range of views on this topic. And I also note, Mr. Speaker, that at your conference, you did a great deal of work on this in the last Parliament. Should my honourable friend wish to have a meeting with the relevant House officials to discuss this matter, to see how it might be taken forward, to see if there is a consensus on this matter, then I'll help him to arrange it.
Rebecca.
Speaker, I thank the Leader of the House for his recent reply to my letter offering my support for the Regulating for Growth Bill that was announced in the King's Speech. However, in his response, whilst he was effusive in his gratitude for my interest in the bill, he definitely ignored my question around the timetabling of that bill in the House. Now, this bill is vital for the marine autonomy sector that is based out of my constituency, and they're very, very keen to hear when it's going to come forward. Now, given the comments of my honourable friend, the chairman of the Backbench Committee, about how light government business is at the moment, might I urge him to think about starting that before the summer so that the scrutiny can take place by business and people like me in that point ready for the September sitting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll certainly give some thought to what the Honourable Lady says, but let me knock on the head this idea that the business is light going forward. Next week, we've got 2 days of estimates, Mr. Speaker. Estimates are the lifeblood of this place, holding the government to account on how they spend how they intend to spend taxpayers' money. That's not light business, and I'm sure, thinking about the other measures that we're bringing forward next week, she'll need to be careful in explaining to heavy goods vehicle drivers about why she thinks that our improvements to their situation and the help and support that we're giving to them is a matter of light business. But I understand the need for decisions about investment. We will bring forward a timetable for legislation in the usual way, but I will give some thought to what she said.
Sally Jameson.
Speaker, Doncaster Rovers are a League One football club, but the club Doncaster Foundation is truly Premier League in its outreach work. Last year, they delivered nearly £23 million of social value in Doncaster, and for every £1 invested, there was £11.50 return on education and community impact. So does the Leader of the House agree with me that football clubs and their charity foundations should be celebrated for the work they do, but also that other clubs should look towards Doncaster Rovers and the Club Doncaster Foundation for best practice on and off the pitch?
Mr. Speaker, and I certainly pay tribute to Doncaster Rovers for everything that they do, and also other clubs who play an important part in their local community. And I would encourage, as my honourable friend has said, others where perhaps they need to step up a little, that they look at what Doncaster Rovers is doing. It's not just about what happens on the pitch, it's about the work that they do in the wider community.
Lisa Smart.
Mr. Speaker, some of my youngest constituents have been in touch with me because they're really worried they're being split up from their friends in their class because they go to Woodley Primary School, which is facing stretched budgets and a lowering birth rate, so it means Woodley's going to mixed age classes. I wonder if we could have a statement from the Department for Education about government support for schools moving to mixed age classes, so that I can raise the concerns of some of my youngest constituents who are really worried about what's coming for them in September.
Leader. Mr. Speaker, because many schools, not just in the Honourable Lady's constituency, but many schools are having to come to terms with the fact of a falling birth rate and how best to organise services, and it's not an easy thing to do. Should she seek a Westminster Hall debate, Mr. Speaker, or an adjournment debate, then she might hear directly from the Minister about how best government can help that.
Tim Rocker.
Speaker, will the Leader of the House join me in welcoming the GMB Unions campaign to protect the 130 low-paid Churchill cleaners in this place from redundancy? Does he agree that Parliament must remain clean for all, and does he further agree that the government's policy of ending the outsourcing of cleaning jobs should also be adopted by the parliamentary authorities?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for bringing this matter to the House. We all agree, I hope, Mr. Speaker, that cleanliness and the upkeep of the parliamentary estate is absolutely vital. It allows us to continue to do our jobs. The policy that he mentioned, Mr. Speaker, is in the purview of the House authorities. And if my honourable friend should wish to make his case to the appropriate House official, then I would help to him in that process.
Apprenticeship.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the House has many skills, as we all know, and part of that, and many members won't know, footballing skills are included in that. In this World Cup season, can I just suggest to the Leader of the House that playing fields play an important part in the football story and narrative of many both boys and girls playing football, many of them now playing for England. So is he aware that Shropshire Football Association, who supported football since 1877, their campaign to protect where we play in Shropshire, and also to ensure that our playing fields are protected, they're not built on. We understand we've got to build more houses, but it needs to be at the right scale in the right place. And does he share my concern of the government's plans to remove Sport England as a statutory consultee?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I regret to say I think the honourable gentleman is mixing me up with someone else if he thinks that I've got footballing skills. But let's plough on regardless. Let me be very clear about this. It is important that we protect our playing fields. We do need houses. We need homes so that people can live fulfilling lives. But we also need to protect playing fields wherever we possibly can. And the government is committed to that. If he wants reassurance on that matter, either I can arrange a meeting with the relevant minister, or he could seek an adjournment debate to make his case.
Baggy-Shanker.
Mr. Speaker, in Derby, my constituents are fed up with getting fleeced by private parking operators. And it's not just Derby. The RAC expects a record of 17 million fines in just the last year alone, costing drivers well over £100 million. It's right that this government is standing up for drivers in Derby and across the country by introducing a new private code of practice. But does the Leader of the House agree that it's time to crack down on these unfair private parking fines? And will he ensure that this House is promptly updated when the new code of practice will be released?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for raising this matter. He is right that our new private parking code of practice will raise standards across the private parking industry to ensure that drivers are treated fairly. Stricter regulation for private parking companies will curb aggressive fines and debt recovery tactics. And I'm sure that the House will be updated when the Code of Practice is published, and I hope that will be at the earliest opportunity.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Leader and colleagues across the House will be aware, when charities and voluntary groups arrange drop-in sessions here at Parliament, we as members receive emails from constituents urging us to attend and support them. Yesterday I attended the Leukemia UK event in the House, and as is often the case, their main request is for early diagnosis. Could the Leader arrange for the Health Minister to come to the House and give some reassurance to those people about earlier diagnosis for this terrible disease?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the honourable gentleman is an assiduous constituency MP and campaigner on these matters, and I pay tribute to him for that. It is important. The government recognises that all cancer patients should get diagnosed in the shortest time possible, which is why we published our National Cancer Plan. We've also backed that up with £2.3 billion of investment, which will deliver 9.5 million additional tests by 2022. But I know that the vital work that charities like Leukemia UK play, they will want reassurance about that. And I'll see if we can get either a statement or some update from the relevant minister to satisfy the honourable gentleman.
Holly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend will be aware that in response to violence and disorder last year in Broadstairs, I've worked with Kent Police, South Eastern Railways, the local councils and British Transport Police to establish better ways of tackling the problem of antisocial behaviour, and yet still it returns, this time in Margate as well as Broadstairs this week. Now, I've welcomed the extra resources allocated to seaside towns last year by this government, which definitely helped. Will my right honourable friend convey the concerns of my constituents to the Home Secretary that we need to continue to resource our coastal communities, in particular East Thanet, but indeed his own in Tynemouth, to meet the needs of the influxes of visitors and tackle the willful misbehaviour of a determined few?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And as my honourable friend says, I'm very, very keen that this issue is tackled. I should be hopefully be returning to my constituency this weekend, and if the weather is fine, I'm sure that the police will rise in Operation Coast Watch, I think I'm meeting them tomorrow, will rise to the challenge of young people coming to the, predominantly young people coming to the coast, particularly if the weather is well. I welcome them coming, but I do hope that they will behave when they get there. We've already passed the Crime and Policing Act, which will tackle some of these behaviours. We will be introducing respect orders with named local antisocial behaviour leads, and we're also providing the police with the powers that they need to address these instances. We have to have the powers, but we also have to have the investment in more police officers and encourage chief constables, as many of them do, to recognise that at time of great demand, they need to deploy those officers in a particular way, and coastal towns have a particular claim.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Pubs are the lifeblood of our local communities, and in Wokingham we are very lucky to have so many great pubs. To try to help them, I ran my Wokingham Best Pub competition, recognising the value of pubs and their staff. Will the leader join me in congratulating the 2 Poplars who won the Best Club Pub competition last Friday? And as I know he likes to support local pubs, will he consider joining me for a pint in the 2 Poplars, where he'll find good beer and good food?
Thank you very much indeed. Again, the Honourable Gentleman's an assiduous campaigner for his constituency. I congratulate him on setting up the scheme to recognise the importance of pubs in his local community, and I very much congratulate the 2 Poplars in achieving that. I'm tempted, I have to say, so I will have a look at my diary and see what we can do.
David Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's plenty of great pubs across Stoke-on-Trent North and Kisgrove I could invite the Leader of the House to, but today I want to talk about Wendy, Val and residents at Bradley Village in my constituency of Stoke-on-Trent North and Kisgrove. Time and again, they fundraise and hold community events to raise money for good causes, and most recently they raised £1,000 for a local sight loss charity. So would the Leader of the House please join me in saying thank you to Wendy, Val and everyone at Bradley Village, and can we make time for a debate on the role of community champions so that we can recognise all they do for our local communities?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for raising this matter. The work and dedication to the community from individuals like Wendy, Val and the residents of Bradley Village is an inspiration to us all, and I'm pleased that he brought that story to us today. And I indeed join my honourable friend in thanking them for everything that they do, but also community volunteers right across our country, because as I've described them before, they are the golden thread that tie our communities together.
Tessa Munt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituent Dean Collier chairs Priddy Folk Festival, a local volunteer-run community event which for 34 years has brought really good music and raised money for the village facilities. For 20 years, campers and festival goers used metered water in a tap on the village green. Bristol Water removed that meter last year, so the organisers can no longer use the tap. The mains pipe to the village has a standpipe point in a perfect location, but Bristol Water has outsourced its supply sandpipes to a company called Akram, who refuse to fit a standpipe if people are going to drink the water. So we have a mains pipe full of potable water, a water company happily fit to be used, a subcontractor which won't allow me to standpipe, and 5,000 thirsty folk music fans in a fortnight's time. Can the Leader of the House ask the DEFRA Secretary urgently to knock some heads together so that we can get a supply of drinking water at community events, and I ask her what steps she can take to ensure that where there is a potable main supply and an approved standpipe connection.
Through the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I hope that the water suppliers and all of their contractors have listened to what the Honourable Lady has said here today, and that they act on that. I know there are considerations about safety and quality of water, but I'm sure it's not beyond the wit of them if they put their heads together to make this happen. If she can let me know how this progresses, should DEFRA need to get involved, I'm not sure what their powers are in this regard, then if she lets me know, then we will see what further action will be taken. But I would encourage the water companies to sign up to sorting this out.
Andy McNair.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. One of the keys to opportunities in places like Rosendale and Darwin is reindustrialisation, making more things in more places, creating good jobs close to home. To make this real, we need economic policy that truly understands the particular constraints facing our small towns and rural communities. We need to be connected and enabled a policy that works for all parts of the country and not just places with a mayor. This will require a truly ambitious industrial strategy that gets behind every business and a government fully committed to buying British. Would Leader agree to debate in government time how we can make this happen?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is absolutely right to point to the importance of towns and communities such as Rosendale and Darwin. They have a vital role to play in Britain's economic future, as do our rural areas, as do our urban areas too. And the government's industrial strategy is focused on driving investment and creating well-paid jobs in every part of the country. And our efforts have helped to secure £360 billion in private investment to date, which will support over 120,000 jobs. But I would encourage him to apply for a Westminster Hall debate or an adjournment debate so that he can put his concerns about the importance of towns directly to a minister.
Andrew Rossingdale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I feel sure that the Leader of the House will want to join me in celebrating this week with the people of Romford. We have a double celebration. Firstly, Armed Forces Day, where there is a magnificent parade through the town centre with the Royal British Legion Band and Corps of Drums, ex-servicemen, cadets and many others that join to salute our brave service men and women. But secondly, the 10-year anniversary of 70% of my constituents voting to leave the European Union and take back control of their country. But I would say, Madam Deputy Speaker, today, if I could make one very serious point about the closure of schools across the country. Will the Minister come to the House today to say no? We've learnt the lesson from COVID. Closing schools because of a heat wave is the wrong decision to make. Taking children out of the classroom is absolutely wrong. So will the Minister make a statement?
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I certainly join the honourable gentleman in praise of Armed Forces Day and wish the events in Romford all our very best wishes. It's really important that happens and the community can celebrate the importance of our armed forces. And I imagine his area, like mine, has been a recruiting area in the past. I'm not going to join him, however, in celebrating the 10th anniversary of leading the UK. I'm tempted to ask, how is that going then? So I'm not going to join in with that. I'm not going to condemn schools either for making decisions. They have to do what is right in the circumstances for them. I understand concerns because I remember them from the COVID years about the impact it can have on education, but the safety of children, staff and other workers is absolutely important. As I said in an answer to an earlier question, there was a COBRA meeting earlier in this week where the government is looking to see what further advice or action needs to be given, and if anything further needs to happen, the government will take that action.
Pam Cox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Young people in Colchester will really benefit from their new youth hub. That's one of 14 set up across Essex. Will the Leader of the House make time for a debate on the early impact of those youth hubs and the youth guarantee that so brilliantly underpins them?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is a champion for the Youth Guarantee, and I pay tribute to her for all the work that she does to support young people. We are, over the next 3 years, expanding the Youth Hubs network to over 360 locations across Great Britain, ensuring that every young person can access opportunities and comprehensive support in their local area. And to celebrate that, I would encourage my honourable friend to look for a debate in Westminster Hall or an adjournment debate to see what more we can do to support our young people.
Freddie Van Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Protected land in villages like Stoke Row and Park Corner in my constituency are being sold off in small lots. Auctioneers subtly encourage buyers into paying over the odds for land that has no prospect of planning consent. The result is disappointed and ripped off buyers. Plot holders are left with failed investments that try to monetise them in ways that go against planning rules. We've also seen some members of the Gypsy and Traveller community move ahead with unauthorised development using their ownership of the land to their advantage in the planning system. My residents are sick and tired of this and expect the government to act through the NPPF and planning rules. Will the Minister support my efforts to secure a Westminster Hall debate on this topic so we can discuss this further.
Leader of
Thank
the
you, Madam
House.
Deputy Speaker. I would encourage him to apply for a Westminster Hall debate, which is, I'm not the person that allocates those in any way, but he raises very important matters. It is important that he hears from planning ministers to see whether or not, given what he has said, then further legislation is necessary, or whether the legislation exists, but local authorities, whoever has that authority, actually uses that legislation.
Ewan Steinbank.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Government's announcement of a review into the zero-emission vehicles mandate with the objective of slowing the pace in of ZEV targets. However, I don't believe this changes the direction of travel for bus manufacturing, which supports 50,000 jobs across the United Kingdom and is similarly struggling with the rise in imported Chinese electric buses. Can the Leader arrange for a statement from either DBT and or DFT ministers to this House to update on the scope of this reported review?
Madam Deputy Speaker, nobody in this House campaigns harder on behalf of the industry than my honourable friend, and I thank him for that. The Government has allocated more than £73 million in additional funding to deliver almost 500 zero-emission buses across England. And the mandate is devolved policies, but we're working with devolved governments to ensure that meaningful engagement takes place ahead of that review. And I will raise his concerns with the relevant minister to see if there's any further update that we can share with him.
Monica Harding.
Madam Deputy Speaker, would the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Princess Alice Hospice in my constituency, which celebrated its 40th anniversary this year, and since then it's cared for tens of thousands of people and has been a staple for local families when at their most vulnerable. However, only 20% of its funding comes from statutory NHS funding. The rest mainly comes from selling woolly jumpers. So as a result, they're only able to reach 1/3 of the local need. So access to palliative care will come under scrutiny once again in the autumn. So will the Leader of the House make time to address sustainable funding for palliative care to ensure provision for all is available?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Princess Alice Hospice for everything that they do. They and hospices in all of our areas are so very important. I do understand their concern about having sustained funding going forward, but the Government has committed £125 million to support the Hospice Centre, with a further £26 million to support children and young people's hospices. She's right that I suspect this issue will come more into focus as other private bills are coming forward. She'll get her opportunity, I think, then to make that case. In the meantime, if there's anything that the Government can do to update the House about that, I'm sure they'll think about doing it.
Josh Newbury.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last month, my constituent Kyle Pusey was recognised with Cannock Chase District Council's Youth Endeavour Award for his outstanding years of volunteering at Norton Keynes Library. Kyle's known for being polite, hard-working and always willing to go the extra mile. So would the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Kyle on this well-deserved achievement? And could we have a debate on the positive difference he and many other young people make to communities up and down our country?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I certainly join my honourable friend in congratulating Kyle on his Youth Endeavour Award. He sounds like a credit to his local community and to his family and to his friends. But I also want to thank everyone who's involved in volunteering in service of their local communities, ultimately making them a better place to live. If my honourable friend seeks a Westminster Hall debate or an adjournment debate, not just to talk about the work and success of Kyle, I'm sure there are others that will be able to raise issues from their own constituencies.
Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 20th of May at Prime Minister's Questions, I raised the fears of my constituents, like Lee, about the exceptionally high levels of forever chemicals and watercourses near the former RAF Upper Hayford. Without hesitation, the Prime Minister agreed to ask the Environment and Health Secretaries to meet with my constituents and me. 5 weeks later, the two Secretaries of State have repeatedly refused a meeting. Instead, the Water Minister's office has offered 15 minutes for, and I quote, an initial discussion before recess. My constituents are deeply worried and desperate for the Government to take a grip. So may I ask the Leader of the House to help me to secure, without delay, the meeting that the Prime Minister promised?
Leader of the House.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will endeavour to find a way through this so that what the Prime Minister committed to happens.
Julie Minns.
Deputy Speaker, I am delighted that Cumberland Council is to partner with Carlisle College and Story Construction Group to renovate the old Keeper's Lodge in Bitts Park in my Carlisle constituency. The college's construction students will gain invaluable experience of working on a live construction site. There will be no cost to the council, and a much-loved building will be brought back into public use. Does the Leader of the House agree with me that this partnership model could be adopted elsewhere to bring back other much-loved buildings, and will he join me in thanking Stephen Dunn, the council officer whose brainchild this project is?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, my honourable friend is right to champion the scheme that she refers to. It sounds like an excellent partnership that benefits both sides, and I join her in congratulating Stephen Dunn for instigating this project and the many council officers across our country who do a fantastic job. I'll make sure that the Secretary of State hears about it, because it sounds like it's an arrangement that has a lot of potential going forward.
Claire Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Freeholders on private managed estates currently face unregulated service charges and have no meaningful recourse if managing agents are incompetent. In January, the Minister of State for Housing committed to tackling these so-called freehold schemes by the end of this Parliament. But with a new Prime Minister likely to reset the legislative agenda, affected constituents will be worried that this promise will be quietly dropped. Will the Leader of the House request from the Minister a written statement on delivery?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I read out in the Business a debate next week on these issues, so I hope that the honourable lady will be able to make her case there. But let me reassure her that the government is absolutely committed to taking action here in this matter, and I'm sure that whoever is the Prime Minister, that commitment will be maintained.
Danny Beales.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Met Police plays a vital role in keeping those who work, live and visit London safe, including us here in this chamber. The Labour government and our Mayor has stepped up and increased funding, but at the same time, the unique challenges that the Met faces of policing protests, complex crimes and terrorism has all increased, which means despite this uplift, there still remains a gap in funding. Will the Leader of the House make time for debate about the future funding for the Met, and in particular the opportunity to bridge this gap by enabling the Met to retain a proportion of the value of the cryptocurrency it recently seized as part of Op Manor, which is estimated to be worth between £3 to £9 billion, so that we can invest in the equipment, police stations and police officers we desperately need?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government is absolutely committed to ensuring that the Met Police have the resources that they need. We've increased funding by £446 million since we came to office. Court proceedings relating to Operation Manor are ongoing, and critical elements are still to be considered before any asset is realised. But ministers will consider how any residual funds are distributed, and that will include reflecting on the role of the Metropolitan Police Service.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I always thank the Leader of the House again for all those answers. Will the Leader of the House ask the Foreign Secretary to make a statement on the protection of recognised and unrecognised religious minority communities in the Gulf region? Following Human Rights Watch reports that Qatari authorities have ordered members of the key Baha'i institution to leave the country without due process or an effective legal avenue to challenge these decisions, can I ask what steps the government is able to take through its close bilateral relationships in the region to encourage stronger protections for freedom of religious or belief, legal recognition and due process for minority faith communities? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The honourable gentleman, as ever, raises an important matter, and we strongly condemn the persecution of Baha'i communities in many countries around the world. Our Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion and Belief, the Honourable Member for North Northumberland, has met with the Baha'i International Community UN representative to discuss the persecution that they face, and regularly engages with the community. But I will, as ever, raise his specific concerns with the Foreign Office and make sure that he gets a reply on what further action the government can take.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For years, my constituent, Donna Louise Armstrong, has worked tirelessly to serve the veteran community, locally and nationally, as our area coordinator for Poppy Scotland and also as Vice Chair of the Homeless Veterans Project, which she helped establish in 2019. She's very often seen at events in the constituency in her Paddington Bear outfit, raising funds for homeless veterans. She recently received recognition of her outstanding work in the King's Honours. So as we approach Armed Forces Day, will the Leader of the House join me in congratulating Donna on her British Empire Medal for services to veterans and the wider Renfrewshire community, and thank her for her immense contribution to the lives of so many veterans?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the honourable friend for this very well-timed question during Armed Forces Week, and I do indeed join her in congratulating Donna Louise Armstrong for her years of service to her local community and her very well-deserved British Empire Medal for services to our veterans and community. Her friends and her family should be very, very proud of her.
Sir Alex Shelborough.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the last hour and a half, I've had several emails and telephone calls, and I will read one of these emails, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am writing this email as I have been reliably informed that bidding has commenced for turning Linton-on-Ouse RAF base into an immigration detention centre. I am deeply concerned as this proposal was put forward 4 years ago and caused great stress and turmoil to our local community. I'd also like to know why the local community was not informed of this decision before a decision was made to use the base for something that was deemed unsuitable years ago. Madam Deputy Speaker, may I ask the Leader of the House whether we can have a statement before the end of today's business so that some of these questions may be put to the Minister directly before we break for the weekend?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This was raised earlier, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do understand the concerns of members. Let me take this away and see if we can get the assurance that not just he but other members are seeking.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a member of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, I've seen firsthand the courage and dedication that our service personnel in the military show each and every day, and I want to commend them during Armed Forces Week. One of my constituents is an Army reservist, newly attested, and he is, of course, proud to serve our country, but his experience shows some of the barriers that they face when they're training. Took nearly a year to train, but crucially, he had to spend over £1,000 on travel, on equipment, on medical appointments. And unfortunately, this barrier resulted in many other dedicated applicants dropping out. So on his behalf, would the Leader of the House grant a debate on the need to support the recruitment and training of our Army reservists?
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend is right to raise this matter during our Armed Forces Week. Reservists are an integral part of the effectiveness of our armed forces. They do bring experience from defence, they strengthen resilience, they provide specialist skills that can't be generated or sustained in regular forces alone. I would encourage my honourable friend to seek either a Westminster Hall debate or an adjournment debate so that he can make the case that he's in greater detail than the strong case that he's made today.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK Parliamentary Schools outreach worker for the South West saw 20,000 children and 780 adult learners last year. In rural and coastal areas, this provision is absolutely vital. Some of my schools can't get to Parliament, and the ones that are struggling to get places. For example, King Charles School in my constituency are in London today and yesterday, but they couldn't come here because there wasn't space. So I'd be grateful if the Leader of the House could find space for a debate in government time about the impact on getting rid of this Parliamentary Schools outreach team upon rural and coastal areas, minorities and people with disabilities.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for her question. I do understand that there are concerns, and I want to acknowledge at the beginning the important work of the outreach and educating the public about what Parliament does and why it matters. It is, of course, a matter for that House. I know that some members have raised this directly with the House authorities via oral and written questions, but I hope and I'm sure that the House authorities will have heard my honourable friend's concerns as they weigh up this matter.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Buried in a bulging budget consultation is a BCP council plan to lay off Lollipop people in my constituency. Across the whole of BCP, half of the few hundred consultees hadn't used a school crossing patrol service in a year. Meanwhile, just in my own constituency, my petition has received many hundreds of more responses, and all of the respondents are clear. They want to save our Lollipop people. I recently met Martin, Georgia, Stella and other members of the School Crossing Patrol who are doing such fantastic work to be a friendly face at the school gates and to keep kids safe. And I want to thank constituents like Stephanie, Sarah and Lisa, Hazel, Laura and Gina, Paul, Emma and Charlotte who are fighting for their Lollipop people. Does the Leader of the House agree with me that BCP Council should think twice, that it should stop laying off Lollipop people, and would he write to the relevant minister to arrange a meeting for me and our local Lollipop people?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend raises an important matter. Road safety is for children is vital, and the work of Lollipop people do for our young people is of paramount importance. And I hope that those in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council have heard my honourable friend's contribution today and take his concerns seriously. And I pay tribute to the work of Martin, Stella, George and the many Lollipop people across our communities. And I hope that this can be resolved properly.
And the final question, Chris Hinchliffe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Earlier this month, the government announced it is putting yet more money into the Lower Thames crossing, meaning we are now due to spend more than £3 billion on a road that costs more per mile than HS2, and we will be privatising away Dartford toll revenues for the privilege. Meanwhile, despite welcome steps by the government, for market towns and villages like those in my constituency, buses remain more of a hypothetical concept than a regular and reliable form of daily travel. So can I gently request that we have a debate on ensuring transport spending matches the genuine priorities of our constituents?
Please, Speaker. My honourable friend knows that bus transport in particular is a key priority for this government, and we're making real progress on that because they are of such importance to towns and villages. But he will also know that it's not a clear either or in these matters. But if he wants a debate to weigh up what is the best use of those resources, then I'd encourage him to apply for a Westminster Hall debate or an adjournment debate so that he and others can make the case for the best possible public transport in their local areas.
And that concludes business questions. I'll just give a few moments for the front benches to swap over. We'll now begin the statement. Statement, Minister.
With your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to make a statement on our steel trade measure, which will come into force on the Wednesday, the 1st of July. I start with first principles. The UK needs a strong steel sector, both production and downstream. But the whole sector is facing an existential moment. 50 years ago, the UK produced 27 million tonnes of steel a year. Even in 2010, we produced 12 million tonnes. But in 2024, we only produced 4 million tonnes and met just 30% of UK steel needs. No government can ever, should ever accept such a sharp decline in an industry that forms the backbone of so many other sectors, including defence. We promised that we would do two things in government in tandem. Firstly, launch a steel strategy tackling all the key issues facing the sector in the round. We published it on the 19th of March. That strategy includes up to £2.5 billion of government investment, on top of the £500 million pledged for steelworks at Port Talbot, plus active support for this energy-intensive sector through the British Industry Supercharger. Secondly, we said we would introduce a robust new steel trade measure that secures the future of the UK steel industry to protect our ability to produce steel for defence and critical national infrastructure. Today, I am addressing this latter point. Why do we need the steel trade measure? A key part of the existential threat to UK steel production is global overcapacity, a lack of transparency about international subsidies and artificially depressed global prices, all of which price UK steel out of the market. For the last 8 years, UK steel production has enjoyed some protection thanks to the UK's steel safeguard, which it inherited from the European Union. That allowed us to produce categories of steel manufactured in the UK with quotas and a 25% out-of-quota tariff. That protection, which was introduced by the previous government, was clearly not sufficient as our steel sector has continued to suffer. And in the 7 years up to 2024 of the safeguard, steel production has continued to fall by 3.3 million tonnes, a stunning further 45%. We now face a key moment. That safeguard legally has to expire on the 30th of June, as WTO rules firmly prevent an extension of a safeguard beyond 8 years. It is precisely the same for the European Union. If we put nothing in its place, our steel production sector will lose all its protection. That wouldn't just bring our steel industry to its knees, it would kill it completely. That's why I promised the House that I would not allow a gap between the expiry of the safeguard and the implementation of our future steel trade measures. We are making good on that promise today. There is an additional concern. Canada, the United States and the European Union have already put in place similar toughened measures to protect their industries. So if we do nothing, or if we delay introducing new measures, we will immediately become the global dumping ground for cheap steel across the world. Again, I say, that would mean the end of UK steel production. That is why we must take similar action to the European Union, who announced their measure on October the 7th last year. So earlier this year, we committed to introduce a 50% out-of-quota tariff on imported steel, and in April published provisional quotas for several key categories of steel. This measure needs to work not just for our steel producers, but also, of course, for our manufacturers who depend on steel, those who source it from the UK and those who source it from abroad. Our aim is solely to protect categories of steel that we produce in the UK, so we have deliberately excluded many categories from the measure. To be absolutely clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, nearly 3/4 of UK steel imports by value and 53% by volume are out of scope of this measure. Today, I am announcing the final design of our steel trade measure, which will take effect on the same day as measures imposed by the European Union. The total quota volume will now be 3.2 million metric tonnes. That is an increase of over 560,000 metric tonnes of steel that can be imported tariff-free compared to the provisional volumes we announced, a significant 21% uplift. Today's announcement includes the final quotas in each category. Having listened to members and to industry, we have increased the quotas in several instances so as more accurately to protect categories of steel that are manufactured in the UK. Some of the changes reflect the fact that the European Union remains our largest export market for steel, and we have highly interconnected supply chains. Since we announced our measure in March, we have engaged intensively with the European Union and with UK industry. We have reached a mutual outcome with the EU as a result of these discussions. On our side, we will increase the EU's quota access from the announced 1.58 million tonnes to 2.08 million tonnes. The EU will be announcing quotas under their own measure shortly. This will provide stability for UK-EU steel trade from the 1st of July, while we continue to work together to strengthen UK-EU steel trade longer term. We have also worked closely with our international partners, and we're committed to constructive engagement with them on our steel measure, and we will continue to prioritise working with our partners to tackle overcapacity. I want to be very honest with colleagues. There are tough trade-offs here. We are determined to ensure that steel continues to be forged and made right here in the UK by proud steel-making communities across the UK, in Port Talbot, in Motherwell, in Scunthorpe, in Sheffield, on Teesside. The labour movement was forged in these communities just as steel was, and we won't let them down. But we know that businesses will sometimes need to find specialised steel that we simply can't procure here in the UK. In these cases, quotas have been designed to allow for imports and to ensure continued availability for UK businesses without additional unnecessary costs. To ensure continuity within supply chains for business, we are also introducing a transitional arrangement. It means that our new trade measure will not apply to steel under contract before the 14th of March and imported between the 1st of July and the 30th of September. We will conduct a review after 12 months and actively monitor implementation of the measure from day one to ensure it operates as intended and remains responsive to emerging evidence and stakeholder feedback. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are some who think steel is an industry of the past. Others think the market alone should provide. Just buy it as cheap as you can, whatever the cost to British industry. I couldn't disagree more, because I know how that script runs. We buy cheap this year and next year and maybe for a decade. Unable to compete, our national steel industry dies in the meantime. Every single UK steel mill closes. And then suddenly and miraculously, the global price rockets up. And we have nowhere to turn because we would be caught in a trap of our own making. That's why I say to those who worry about our measure today, and I fully understand those concerns and will seek to address them, that this is in the interest of the whole sector, producers and users alike. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will be hosting a drop-in surgery for members on Monday, the 29th of June, from 3:15 to 5 p.m, where colleagues can meet with me and officials to discuss any concerns or understand the impact of this measure on their particular businesses in their own constituency. I hope that that will be of convenience to members. I'd especially like to thank my officials, including Beth Sedgwick, Malta Werner and Chris Taylor, and the wonderful Lola Oates in my private office, for all the work that they've done on this. I commend this statement to the House.
I got Shadow Minister Andrew Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for advance sight of today's statement. We, on this side of the House, welcome the partial U-turns that have been announced and the engagement that's happened and the reflection, even at this very late hour, that the original proposals the government made would have done great damage to British manufacturing. This decision could, however, have come months ago, and if not, it could have come weeks ago, when members in this House, as well as businesses, started raising the alarm and engaging with the department. It took this government, if you remember, more than 1 year and 3/4 to come up with its original steel strategy, and yet now the industry are expected to adjust with fewer than 1 week to go. That is not a reasonable way on which to proceed. The government has left untouched the 50% tariff rate, and that will do great damage to British manufacturing, to house builders and those who construct the nation's infrastructure. Higher inflation, fewer jobs, fewer homes, fewer public projects. The government's made some concessions today, welcome, on how much steel can be brought in, but nothing on the rate that punishes imported steel the very moment that the quota is exceeded. I know, and he knows, that he's received significant private representations from industry on this issue, particularly in the case of defence and aerospace. And I imagine he does understand it won't be enough. Of the 60 codes that we believe are relevant to aerospace and space, just 2 codes have been removed. And while quota uplifts have been applied, they are not particularly useful to the small-scale but high-value defence manufacturers, as commodity buyers will snap up all of those quotas at the start of the year before they get a look in. As a result, we are, I'm sad to say, putting the defence of this country at risk by imposing a shock to defence industry prices, and it'll either be the Treasury or the MOD that'll be picking up the bill. Projects like AUKUS, Tempest, drones and much-needed munition rearming are all going to be vulnerable as a consequence. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me put some questions on behalf of the industry. Would he commit today to publish the unpublished so far impact assessment on downstream steel sectors before Parliament rises for the summer? Does the Minister understand that by not exempting pre-agreed purchase contracts, which may in some cases run for years, he's damaging good, decent British manufacturing firms, even those in Rhondda and Ogmore? His exclusions rest on a test of no production or production paused. But will he explain how he justifies keeping specialist grades in scope when in some cases, like aerospace, it takes years to certify suppliers? And can he confirm that the EU's reciprocal quota for exports from the UK will fully protect the 2.4 million tonnes of annual British exports of steel that would otherwise be at risk?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I honestly just don't think that the honourable member understands how this works, any single element of it, to be honest. Let me first address his point about the timing. I would have much preferred to have been able to give much greater notice to everybody, and I worked towards being able to do that. Unfortunately, one of the key parts of the interaction is with the European Union, and we only completed our negotiations with the European Union over the last few days. And I would point out that the EU themselves have not announced their quotas either with us or for any other country as yet, and won't be doing so until Monday. So I wanted to bring this forward as soon as I possibly could. He refers to U-turns. We've actually listened to some of the concerns that people have had, both specific businesses some of them I know are very pleased with some of the categories that we've changed and the quotas that we've increased, but also to honourable members in the Chamber who've brought concerns either both in the Chamber itself or directly to ministers, and we've tried to address as many of those issues as we can. But I need, as I said in the statement, there are difficult trade-offs here. And when it he suggests that we should cut the 50% tariff rate. I'm not sure that that's a point that he's made anywhere previously. But if we had a lower tariff rate than other countries, and in particular the European Union, we would, and this is why I don't think he understands how any of this works, we would immediately become the dumping ground for all the cheap steel in the world. I mean, that's precisely what we will be, a magnet for that, and we will be exacerbating the problem that we already have for steel production in the UK. He raised the question about defence. Now, I've looked very carefully at this, and of course he wrote a letter, I think this morning, which was making some rather ill-founded remarks about what's likely to happen to defence. Obviously, first of all, Sheffield Forge Masters is already providing significant amounts of UK steel precisely into the UK defence sector. I also actually want to see, when the defence investment plan is produced, I want it to be delivering jobs in the UK. Rather than just everywhere else in the world. And I'd like more of our defence expenditure, of our defence industry, to be based on using UK steel, because I think then that's a double win for us. And I just note that when the previous government was in place, they commissioned Type 26 frigates. 65% of that steel came from Sweden. Type 31 frigates, all the steel from Finland. 4 Royal Fleet Auxiliary Tide class tankers, 44,000 tonnes of steel from Korea. When the Dreadnought class nuclear ballistic missile submarines were commissioned by them, where did the steel come from? From France. We can do far, far better than this. It is absolutely preposterous that only 30% of UK steel needs are being met by UK steel production. We need to get that number up. We've committed to getting it to 50%, and that's why I am immensely supportive of this measure that we're introducing today. I also want to just make it clear, not only that a lot of categories of steel, as I said, 3/4 of the steel by value is not covered at all, is not in scope in this at all. So it can come in and out of the UK without any tariff at all. Also, of course, the 50% is not a tariff on all the steel in a particular category. It's only on that above the quota. And in significant areas, we've increased the quota precisely so that, for instance, in Category 4, Category 6, Category 12A and Category 7, which is particularly important for the defence sector, the final quotas are higher than the levels of historic trade because some of the previous quotas weren't even being fully used. So I'm afraid the honourable member is wrong in nearly every single element of his analysis, and that's not the first time, is it?
Dame Leah Griffith.
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, whilst I certainly welcome the protection of our steel industry, I do remain concerned about some tariffs and quotas affecting some products. But I was really pleased to hear the Minister reiterate what the Industry Minister said on Wednesday, that alongside measures to protect our industry, our government is absolutely committed to increasing the range of products that we make in the UK. So to that end, would he agree to meet with me about a proposal from a constituent of mine in Llanelli about opening a manufacturing facility to produce steel bands which currently have to be imported from the EU, so we can bring that production back here to the UK?
It's an extremely well-made point, and in fact gun barrel manufacturing is now being done in the UK again, thanks to a Sheffield Forge Masters contract which has been secured. We need to bring more of these categories back into UK production, and I'm very happy to meet with her. She might want to come along to the surgery that I'm doing Monday afternoon with officials. If she wants to talk to me, or she knows how to find me, then we can make sure that we do that. But she's absolutely right. We need to increase the total quantity of steel that we're producing in the UK. We need to protect what we're already doing, and we need to find new areas where we can produce steel. We will never do that unless we introduce steel, tough protections and in trade measures to deal with the problem of global overcapacity.
Lib Dem spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Minister for advance sight of his statement.
Steel matters. It matters for our national security, for our defence, for our critical infrastructure, and it sustains jobs right across the United Kingdom. British Steel supports thousands of jobs and over £1 billion of economic activity through its own operations and supply chain, and it underpins hundreds of thousands more jobs and several £1 billion of activity across the industries that depend on it. It has been battered by Trump's trade war and by years of unfair practices from China. Steel is an industry worth defending, and Liberal Democrats support that goal. But we've been vocal about our concerns regarding the impact of the government's proposed tariffs on downstream manufacturers. Downstream steel-using industries employ 300,000 people, including some of my own Hazel Grove constituents. A blanket approach risks weakening a far larger manufacturing jobs base while doing little to protect British steel. I'm pleased that the government has listened to our concerns and the concerns of industry. The quota increase and product code removals are positive steps. So I have just 3 questions. First, categories 14 and 27. Specialist steels required by aerospace defence, Formula 1 and precision engineering, and which cannot be sourced domestically in the required grades and volumes. Do these categories fall within the 11 product codes which have been removed from the arrangements? Second, the transitional arrangements only protect contracts signed before the 14th of March. What protection exists for manufacturers who signed contracts in good faith between March and today? And third, the WTO process will begin in the autumn. Could the Minister confirm that any permanent tariff increases resulting from that process will not permanently lock in higher tariffs on specialist steels that cannot be sourced domestically?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think she was getting a little bit confused between product codes and categories. In categories 40, if I start with 17, we've increased the quota by a significant amount, and I hope that that will reflect the lack of production that there is at the moment. It's an issue that several members have already raised with me, and that we've done that specifically to answer those questions. And likewise, in category 14, which is stainless bars and light sections. She asked about the transition arrangements. I already referred to that in my statement. If she wants further details, she can come and talk to me about it on Monday. And I didn't fully understand, I'm afraid. I'm not sure whether ministers are meant to admit that, but I didn't fully understand the last question. So if she wants to either grab me later or drop me a note, then I will respond to her that way.
Serena Brackenridge.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Tata Steel Park in Wensfield and manufacturers across Wolverhampton North East and the Black Country rely on resilient supply chains for steel. Can the Minister set out how today's statement on increased quotas and for steel that's already under contract before the 14th of March will continue to back British-made steel production, whilst also giving downstream manufacturers the competitive certainty and confidence that they need?
Well, my honourable member is my honourable friend is absolutely right to defend her constituents' interests. We have tried to meet the precise concerns that she's raising. I'm very happy to go through with her on Monday afternoon if she wants in each of the different categories of steel, which might be applicable to hers. I would say that I think some people have given the impression that we are cutting all categories of steel and that nobody will be able to bring in categories of steel without being tariffed. But actually the quotas in most areas allow for historic levels of imports. And in other areas where we do produce in the UK, we are trying to persuade people to buy British steel and use British steel. That is the whole aim of the measure. So we are trying to get 2 wins out of this. As I say, I'm happy to take her through the very specifics in relation to individual categories if she wants on Monday afternoon.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hundreds of my constituents work at Scunthorpe Steel, so I'm obviously supportive of any action that the government take that would protect those jobs. And I welcome the adjustments that the Minister has announced today. And I agree with him that it's preposterous that defence contracts, for example, do not ensure that we use British steel. Surely one of the benefits of not being tied to EU procurement rules should allow us to do that. But would the Minister agree that it's within the government's gift to ensure that the industry benefits from reduced energy costs? And what will the government be doing to ensure that Scunthorpe Works do benefit from lower energy costs in the very near future?
Minister.
Well, he will know that the supercharger, we changed the rules in April of this year, so that taking up the support from 60% to 90% of energy costs, because the point is well made about energy costs being one of the things that have made it very difficult for steel over the last decade. Just on whether we're better being in or out of the European Union. I mean, one of the ironies is if we were in the European Union, of course, we wouldn't have to be negotiating with the European Union about their imposition of tariffs and quotas on us. So I'm not sure that that is a very good line of argument. Final point I'd make is I was really pleased in Kyiv in January to see a bridge, one of the 6 bridges that had been rebuilt by which had been destroyed when the Russians were trying to invade Kyiv, had been rebuilt, and guess where the steel was made? The United Kingdom. That's the kind of thing that we should be investing in.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituency of Blaenau Gwent and Rumney has many steel fabrication businesses, some of whom I visited recently. For this announcement, can the Minister please outline how he has listened to these sort of businesses and their concerns?
First of all, I and my officials have spoken a great deal to the kind of businesses that he's talking about. Not all of them, but a large number of them. And we've tried to explain that we are only trying to tackle those categories of steel which can and are being produced in the UK. Those are the ones that we're trying to protect for the obvious reason that he will fully understand as a South Wales Valleys MP like myself. And that's meant that we have increased some of the quotas to allow more tariff-free quota imports into precisely to answer the question that some of his companies may have. Now, if he wants to go through the specifics in relation to the companies he has in his own patch, I'm very happy to do that. But I think I won't have pleased everybody. I very rarely ever have in my life, but I didn't mean to unite the chamber on that point. We have tried to listen where we possibly can, but there are difficult trade-offs here.
David Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The imposition of tariff barriers alone is not a sufficient step to help address the shortcomings in our steel industry. And the Minister said that it's important to provide more opportunities to help people buy British steel. But there's a difference between saying things like this and then making it happen. He'll be well aware that at the moment we lack the heavy plate steel and plate rolling capability needed for building the offshore wind turbines that could be made in Port Talbot rather than having to be imported from abroad, while specialist plate for defence applications is also limited. So what's the government doing to close those strategic capability gaps? And has it assessed whether developing a heavy plate mill at Port Talbot could help to underpin the offshore wind industry that we could build in the Celtic Sea?
The honourable member makes a really good point, and that's why we have a steel strategy as well as the steel trade measure. This is only part of the steel strategy. My honourable friend, the industry minister, I know was in the chamber answering an urgent question on some of these issues last week. Some of the energy matters that have been raised by others are key to making sure that that's happened, and also, of course, government procurement policy. One of the first things we did when we arrived in government in 2024 was introduce a new procurement strategy in relation to steel. The very least we could do is make sure that when the government is spending taxpayers' money, it's spending taxpayers' money wherever it possibly can on British steel.
Alex Barris-Curtis.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I refer to my membership of GMB and Unite. I thank the Minister, my upright member friend, for his statement, and I understand the trade-offs he's referred to and the need to take measures to rebalance the sector. He knows, because we've spoken about it a lot, with respect to the steel strategy, it refers to future UK steelmaking being 50% of that being Welsh steel. So I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about that, because that's something my constituents are particularly passionate about.
Yes, and there's a very fetching photograph of him and me at the electric arc furnace in Cardiff, Severn Steel, and it's a very impressive operation. It's a very impressive photograph, but he makes a very good point. We want to get to 50% of UK steel needs being met by UK steel, by British-made steel. It's a very simple campaign. We want, but. As I say, we've had decades now of decline in this sector. We are at an absolutely critical moment. I've heard people say, why can't you just delay this measure for a few months? That would be the end of UK production of steel, completely and utterly. And we simply cannot allow that to happen for our defence needs, for our infrastructure needs, for our national security, frankly. And that's why we are committed in the way that we are.
Sir Julian Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister spoke about monitoring of this policy from day one, but a review not for 12 months. What is the monitoring going to comprise of, and what happens if that monitoring shows problems, very early on? Will he have to wait until that review after 12 months, or how is he going to implement impacts and analysis from that monitoring?
Minister.
It's a very fair point. There are two things that we've tried to do. In key areas, obviously, we want to make sure that people are able to maintain historic trade flows. So we need to monitor how those trade flows are progressing, and we're able to do that with HMRC on a regular basis. And if there is a sudden spike, then we may need to address that. There may be special events, such as there was a fire in Port Talbot the other day. Now, that hasn't actually provided the kind of problem that we thought it might, so we've been able to stick with our plans. But specialty steel, for instance, has not been able to get up and running yet, which is why we adjusted some of the codes in here. And that we always reserve the right, if we absolutely have to make a significant intervention during that period. But I want to be able to provide industry with as much predictability as possible, and that's why we're talking about a one-year review.
Gurinder Singh Josan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Minister's statement, and I also welcome the engagement with members from the ministerial team to understand the concerns of our businesses. I have raised previously the challenges faced by downstream producers in the Black Country, in my constituency in Snevik, including private housewares who use steel suitable for kitchenware. And we're facing a 60% hike in raw materials costs, and the challenges faced by Hadley Industry, who are already looking to reduce headcount, and there are further knock-on effects in their supply chain. So I welcome the increase in quotas and the removal of the majority of categories from the scope of the measure. But can the Minister explain how the Department has been and will be working with individual businesses to understand their concerns and support them going forward?
I've never known a policy area that has been that so depends on the detail and the granular detail that applies to individual companies and obviously individual codes and categories of different steel. I did talk to one business who were very concerned at the beginning of our conversation because they thought that all of their steel imports were going to be covered by what would be in scope, and that they would be tariffed at 50%. It turned out that they didn't actually use a category of steel that was used that's being covered in scope at all, which is why I'm very keen to go through in fine detail where I possibly can with members. And I know he's raised the issue about ceramics and bakeware as well. I'm very happy to have that conversation, and perhaps if you'd like to come along and talk with officials on Monday afternoon, that'd be great.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate the Minister and his departmental colleagues on listening to representations made. And I think it's worth reinforcing that some 75% of steel imports are not impacted by this measure, which is good news. But does the Minister agree with me that the reason we're in this pickle is because the previous administration had no steel strategy for 14 years and allowed the whole industry to collapse by 66%?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I'm going to have to resign because I agree with every single word of what the honourable gentleman just said.
Josh Fenton-Glynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement today, and particularly the decision to remove products where there isn't domestic production. That will make a real difference to specialist manufacturers in Calder Valley, but they are understandably worried that the tariffs will mean what the tariffs will mean for the business. Can I in particular clarify whether galvanised wire products, something I've written to the Secretary of State about, are covered by the exemption, because companies like Siddle and Hilton in my constituency who make specialist fencing can't get the UK produced supply and therefore get inputs from the EU, Turkey and the UAE.
I'm grateful to the comments, and I know he's raised some of these issues, but both with the Secretary of State and with the Industry Minister as well, I think. I think it's probably best if we go through this in granular detail in relation to the particular companies concerned. I just want to correct this idea of there being an exemption. There isn't an exemption. It's just that some categories of steel we are including in the trade measures and some we're not. As the Honourable Member for Reform just said, 75 or nearly 75%, it's actually 74% of steel imports are not covered by the trade measure at all.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too very grateful to the Minister and his colleagues for the flexibility that they've shown so far. And I will come and see him on Monday. Just a couple of things. First of all, could he just be a little clearer about how dynamic he's going to be on quotas? At first look, to me and the businesses in my constituency that are concerned, some of the quotas look a bit tight. If there is a sudden spike in prices following the imposition, is he able to move quickly? And if so, how quickly? Because obviously decisions are made with a long-term view. Secondly, he said he doesn't want the UK, without these quotas, the UK would become a dumping ground for cheap steel. We may well now become a dumping ground for cheap fabricated products. So what's he going to do on fabricated products alongside? And thirdly, obviously, this means the government's going to be collecting millions of pounds from British businesses importing steel who are still going to import above the quota. What's going to happen to that money?
Good question.
The last question is a very clever one, which that's a matter for the Chancellor, however, I think. That's a matter for the Chancellor, however, I think. But just on fabricated steel, he makes a really good point, which I know several people made in the urgent question last week or whenever it was. I was in Turkey trying to negotiate a free trade agreement with them, and in fact talking a bit about steel as well. It's a good point. We will look at that. I don't want to overpromise on the idea that at the moment, there's a fluctuation in prices that we as a government are suddenly going to move in and change all the quotas, because I think that predictability and continuity is often as important for business as anything else. They know the terms under which they're operating. And so I don't want to overpromise. Our main point is that we will do a review after a year and we will engage with everybody all the way through. Well, no, he's saying from a sedentary position that nothing will change. Well, I'm just trying to moderate his expectations of change. But obviously, if there is a very significant exceptional moment, then we may need to act. The kind of thing that I'm talking about is speciality steel, for instance. When we started this process, we thought that it would be up and running again. It's not now, and that's one of the reasons that we've been able to change those categories, quotas. But I don't want to give the expectation that the moment somebody experiences some concern that we're suddenly going to change. Because in the end, as I say, there are difficult trade-offs here. We do want to make sure that UK production of steel survives and grows.
Chris Vins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement. He is very much the government's man of steel. Protecting British steel making capacity means we have reliable supply for years to come. But can the Minister confirm that this announcement is good news for downstream producers in my constituency, like MRI Fabrications, LWC Engineering, and my favourite, the Harlow Group, all based in Harlow, and both for today and for years to come?
If I just had a bit of advice to my honourable friend, I know he's relatively new to the House, but I wouldn't have favourites in one's own constituency, because then the other people who aren't your favourites end up being very, very irritated with you. I have 14 rugby clubs, and I have to be very, very careful. But he makes a very good point. I think just to deal with the individual companies, it'd probably be a good idea if he came along on Monday afternoon. I'm making a lot of dates, aren't I?
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister, the Secretary of State for his statement. When his Minister came here with the statement the other day, I asked him about Thames covers. There are boat fitters in my constituency. They rely on stainless steel tubing. And I got lots of warm words about we're going to go away and consult. I've listened to his statement and read it in great detail today. Is stainless steel tubing something which is now not going to be hit by an additional 50% price, which is what their suppliers are telling them? I'm seeing Thames covers tomorrow at 2:15 p.m. I'd love to
be able to give him a definitive answer.
I'm afraid he's going to have to come along on Monday afternoon. I don't want to give him a false answer now or an inaccurate answer now. So I'm very happy, or if he wants to grab me now with officials, then I'll try and give him the precise answer. I just want to make it absolutely clear that some people, I think, have gained the impression that all their steel will automatically, immediately, if it's imported, be subject to 50% tariffs. I know he understands this, but some other people have clearly misunderstood that it's only the out-of-quota stuff that is subject to 50% tariffs. And in many categories, I'm not sure about the precise category that his company uses, the quota is bigger than historic trade flows. In other words, there is no reason why they should be affected. But I don't want to give him a false impression, so I'm very happy to either see him at the back of the chamber afterwards or on Monday afternoon.
Jess Brown-Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm going to change my question on the hoof based on what the Minister just said, because does he share my concern for the smaller steel fabricators that can't buy large bulk orders of steel? They are reliant on being able to order when an order comes in for them. I have a steel fabricator in my constituency, they're called SFABs, they're a 5th generation business, and they are telling me that this is the hardest they have ever had it. It's worse than COVID. They're not sure that they're going to be able to survive because overseas manufacturers are just going to start fabricating steel to avoid the tariffs. So can he please reflect on the effect of those small and medium-sized fabricators that currently feel like the strategy is all to protect British steel and they're behind that, but it's at the detriment to those downstream providers?
Look, the Honourable Lady is not the only person who's raised this point about fabricated steel to me, and it's one of the things that we do have to watch very, very closely. It's one of the things we'll be looking at from day one. I can't promise that that means we're suddenly going to include fabricated steel, but it's something we have to be careful of. One of the dangers, I think only Canada has introduced a similar measure in relation to fabricated steel, but their steel measure is much tougher than ours and covers, I think I'm right in saying, more categories, and that's why they've also introduced a kind of compensation scheme. Now, I hope we won't need to go down that route. When some countries have suggested increasing fabricated steel, then that provides a different incentive, which can be just as counterproductive. So again, there will be trade-offs in that sphere. Again, I'm very happy to meet with her on Monday afternoon if she wants to come along.
Final question, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank the Minister very much for his statement and for his clear commitment and define things and make things better for us. And it's a real pleasure to hear a statement with so much positivity. I want to ask a question for Canada about Northern Ireland specifically. Will the Minister acknowledge that the severe disproportionate impact that stringent steel tariffs and red tape is having on manufacturing and emergency businesses across Northern Ireland? And can I ask the Minister this question, to commit to providing immediate financial mitigation or regular flexibility for Northern Ireland steel users, thereby to ensure that our foundational industries are not penalised by mainland trade policies and the complexities of the Windsor Framework? Thank you so much.
I've got pages and pages on the Windsor Framework in relation to this, and it only comes up as the last 2 words in the whole of the statement. Look, apart from anything else, part of our negotiations with the European Union has had to be around how we make sure that there's proper provision for Northern Ireland. And when the EU announces its measures on Monday, I hope that he'll be pleased with where we've got to on all of that. I think he asked about financial mitigation, which I think means compensation, and I'm afraid I'm not able to offer that. I want to be very straight with him. As I say, there are trade-offs here. We need to make sure that we have a strong steel sector. I was thinking about my 2 grandfathers. One grandfather was a naval draftsman and then architect on Clydeside, and my other grandfather worked on the railways in the docks in Cardiff. Both of them, steel was absolutely essential to them. I'm sure when they were working in Glasgow or on Clydeside or in Cardiff, they would have expected all the steel to have been made in the United Kingdom. And that's where, if we don't take this step today, we will find that we won't have any British steel at all. And that's why we're keen to take the necessary and, I believe, proportionate steps we're taking.
And that concludes the statement. Point of order, Andrew Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know in a former life the Minister was punctilious about standards in this House, so I just would seek your advice as to how he may correct the record. He referred to a letter that I believe he said his office had received this morning or yesterday. In fact, the Minister, the Department will have received copies of 2 letters, Madam Deputy Speaker. One which was sent a week ago, not on my behalf, but on behalf of hundreds of thousands of small manufacturing businesses who were desperately worried with 1 week to go before tariffs. There was a second letter, Madam Deputy Speaker, on Tuesday of this week, jointly with myself and the Shadow Defence Secretary, again on behalf of that vital industry that keeps us all safe. I've not yet received a reply to either of those. I wouldn't necessarily have expected that, but it wouldn't be right for the record to reflect that he'd only received the letter this morning.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order. The Minister is in his place and may wish to respond. Minister?
Well, I'm grateful for the correction. I'm terribly sorry. I was only referring to the latter letter. We've had a lot of letters on this, and I appreciate, frankly, the fact that lots of members have written to ministers about it. We've tried to respond as quickly as we could, as soon as we were able to, once we'd settled the final quotas. And I also wanted to come to the House to be clear precisely what we've done to meet some of the concerns. And I do try to answer my letters as punctiliously as I possibly can. You don't have to have been a priest in the Church of England to do that, though God is working her purpose out as year succeeds to year.
I thank members for their time. If we can just give a few moments for the front benches to swap over, please. And we will now start the statement on the publication of Draft Conversion Practices Bill for pre-legislative scrutiny. Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I may just start with an apology to the opposition spokesperson. I had intended that my statement would have been sent much earlier today, and I understand that it didn't reach you in time. I do apologise for that, because it certainly was not my intent. Madam Deputy Speaker, with permission, I would like to make a statement about the Conversion Practices Bill, which we are publishing in draft today. Madam Deputy Speaker, across this House, we can all agree that nobody deserves to be abused, no matter who you are. But right now, gaps in the law are allowing a very specific form of abuse to occur. Abuse driven by the false belief that being LGBT+ is shameful, by the false belief that it can be forcibly changed, that if you cause someone enough pain, you will somehow stop them being who they are. People shamed in front of a congregation and pushed to the ground to try and remove the devil. Their families threatening to rape and murder them if they do not change their identity. People beaten or sexually assaulted by someone trying to correct who they are. Real stories, real people, real abusers getting away with it. And Madam Deputy Speaker, today, with this legislation, that stops. Madam Deputy Speaker, the draft bill we are publishing today fills gaps in our existing criminal law to ban abusive conversion practices, and it gives victims and authorities a clear definition with which to identify, tackle, and prevent this abuse. Specifically, the bill creates a new criminal offence of abusive conversion practice measured by 3 specific criteria. First, conduct intended to change a person's sexual orientation or transgender identity. Second, conduct that is abusive in line with other criminal law. Third, conduct that causes serious harm, alarm or distress, which has a substantial effect on the victim's day-to-day activities. We have listened to concerns that this legislation must not create a loophole which pushes abuse abroad, and have included a second offence banning encouraging or assisting an abusive conversion practice outside England and Wales. And we are also creating new conversion practice protection orders to support victims as well as those currently at risk of abuse. These will be similar to protection orders for forced marriage and female genital mutilation, and can protect people even before abuse has happened. Breach of a protection order may be prosecuted as a criminal offence. Offences will carry a maximum penalty of 5 years in custody or a fine, while breaching a protection order carries a maximum penalty of 2 years or a fine. In addition to the new measures in this bill, the government will continue to fund the Conversion Practices Support Helpline and is taking wider action to tackle abuse against the LGBT+ community, including equalising hate crime legislation through the Crime and Policing Act. Madam Deputy Speaker, in developing this bill, I have consulted widely and I have spoken to many who have legitimate concerns about legislating in this area. I have heard concerns about freedom of expression, on parental rights and on religious freedoms. I have spoken to therapists who worry that their important exploratory work with young people might be impacted, that they may be accused themselves of conversion practices. And I want to be completely clear today. I have heard those concerns and acted on them. This bill does not remove anyone's right to freedom of expression or religion or how to parent. This bill simply prevents abuse. And to ensure there is no inadvertent chilling effect on important healthcare, there is an exemption for all healthcare professionals on the face of the bill. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I apologise. Across the globe, countries are acting to ban conversion practices. We have learnt from the 28 different countries who have some sort of ban in place. We have drawn on the important framework from the Council of Europe fought for by my friend, the Honourable Member for Jarrow and Gateshead East. We've studied the evidence on the prevalence and types of conversion practice abuse, and we're clear about where there are gaps in the law. And in the bill published today, we are confident we have learnt the right lessons and got the balance right. A comprehensive ban on abusive conversion practices with no loopholes, with clarity that we will not inadvertently impinge on freedom of expression, important healthcare, and the ability to parent how you choose. Madam Deputy Speaker, there has been a cross-party consensus for years on the importance of this ban. It was Baroness May who first promised legislation back in 2018, and there are members on the benches opposite who have held my job and worked hard on this issue. This ban has been in the manifestos of parties from across the political spectrum because despite our other political differences, we can all agree that abuse is unacceptable. And I hope sincerely that this is an issue where we can work constructively across the House. I welcome cross-party engagement as we discuss our draft legislation, and that is why we have requested and welcome pre-legislative scrutiny of the draft bill by a joint committee. I am confident that this process will make our bill stronger. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are people today suffering crushing, hateful abuse because someone has decided their identity is wrong and that it can be changed. Abuse that is allowed to happen because our current legal framework simply does not acknowledge it. I understand that this draft bill will cause debate. These are not easy issues, but I welcome that challenge and I welcome that debate because we cannot let fear of argument prevent us remembering what matters, that it's our job, our moral responsibility to prevent this pernicious abuse. And I am confident the bill we are publishing today will do just that.
Shadow Minister Minns-Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Minister for the brief side of the statement, and I thank her for her apology. Let me start by setting out a principle that I believe rightly commands the support across this House. We must protect people from harm. Violence, abuse and coercion are wrong, unequivocally so, and they are also already illegal under our current framework. The offences exist, the powers exist, and many she has used as examples are already rightly illegal. This is a challenging area, so we must be careful that bad laws do not get onto the statute book. The duty before us is to consider whether any new legislation is necessary, proportionate and workable. There is a fundamental question about the current evidence base underpinning this proposal. So in any change, the government must demonstrate why existing criminal law is insufficient and how a new offence would materially improve outcomes. If a non-abusive conversion practice isn't a crime, then why would we write it into a new law? Is the Minister reassured that a mother helping their child with their feelings when growing up is not accidentally being criminalised? what we are doing, perhaps when it comes to an invasion of young lives and how we support children and parents to go through any childhood issues. So we must be honest about the risk of unintended consequences to families and parents. It is right to highlight the real concern that broadly drafted provisions, particularly in relation to gender identity, could have a chilling effect on those acting in good faith and stopping our young people having the time and the space to find out who they are and are comfortable being. Parents, teachers, clinicians and therapists must be able to support, guide and where appropriate challenge. That is not harm, that is safeguarding. Gender-related distress is complex and requires careful, sensitive and roundly exploratory engagement. If this bill has the effect, whether intended or not, of creating an affirmation-only culture, then we do risk failing the very young people we are trying to protect. We've already seen the catastrophic impact where professionals have felt unable to raise legitimate concerns, most notably on the grooming gang scandal. We must never sacrifice safeguarding for ideology. So turning to the questions for the Minister, and these are real ones, and the Minister laid out this is difficult. Firstly, regarding the pre-legislative scrutiny, to confirm it will be by joint committee of both houses. Given the legal, ethical and societal complexity of the issue, can the government ensure the vital scrutiny is broad and rigorous? Second, will the government undertake its own full public consultation in addition to any evidence gathering process carried out by the scrutiny committee? This affects families, clinicians, faith groups, individuals across the country. Their voices too must be heard directly in this. Thirdly, can the government guarantee that the exploratory therapy will be explicitly protected in the bill, alongside appropriate support for those who do detransition? Cases such as that as Kira Bell have highlighted the importance of ensuring that individuals can reflect on and, where necessary, reassess any earlier decisions. Professionals must not be deterred from providing that support. Fourth, can the Minister explain how the bill will recognise the principle of informed consent for adults engaging in exploratory therapy in relation to gender distress? Consenting adults must remain free to discuss, question and explore their experiences without fear of criminal sanction. Fifth, how will the proposed legislation interact with existing safeguarding guidance, particularly in schools, children's homes and social services? For those working on the front line in safeguarding, they too need clarity and not confusion, and must be able to act in the best interests of the child without fear of fulfilling their duties could expose them to legal risk. We currently have a lack of clarity in this area regarding consent in the new puberty blockers trial, so this is already an unclear area. Puberty blockers themselves in reality are a form of conversion therapy. How will they be separated from this process? Can the Minister point out any abusive conversion practices that she has directly identified that are not already criminal offences, and spell out directly the current problem she is directly seeking to fix, and clarify and be specific on what is the current legal gap and what she sees are the true gaps in the law and what is currently legal? Now, can the Minister also guarantee that a young person who is simply same-sex attracted will not be encouraged to go down a pathway to actively lead them away from their sexuality and being the gay person they are, and they need to be helped to be happy and comfortable with? These questions go to the heart of the bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, again, we have seen well-meaning legislation, hate crime offences, having a chilling effect on free speech. On this side of the House, we believe in pragmatic, evidence-based policy making. We believe in strong safeguards. And in conclusion, we firmly stand against abuse and coercion. We must ensure that this Labour government is seeking to prevent harm and does not create any new harm.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I understand that the Shadow Minister did not have my statement in enough time, but I am disappointed with the way that she has massively broadened and misrepresented the scope of what's actually in the scope of this legislation in her comments this afternoon. And I would just emphasise that I would encourage people to look at the detail of the bill and the very specific thresholds that we have established, because it is beholden on all of us to make sure this conversation is one based in real facts. I am also disappointed that the Conservative Party, a party who I gave credit to for their commitment on equalities issues in the past, has found itself in the position now where, having promised for years that it supports a ban on conversion practices, it now sounds as though it does not, and it is a grave shame. It is a grave shame, Madam Deputy Speaker. She asks me some good questions, and I will attempt to answer them today. She asks, first of all, is this not already illegal? And my answer to that is no. There are two reasons for this. There are gaps in existing law that mean we cannot prosecute offences properly. So if you think, for example, about domestic abuse legislation or coercive control, legislation designed for somebody who has a relationship with an intimate partner and would not capture an offence for somebody that they did not know. And there are lots of examples like that where there are gaps in the law. Also, it's really important that we have a definition of conversion practice in law, because like with other offences like upskirting or non-fatal strangulation, a definition is really important to help victims understand what's happened to them, to be able to come forward, and for prosecutors to be able to build a case. So I am confident that there is a need to legislate in this area. She asks about the evidence base for the practice of conversion practices, I assume, and I've just come from an event this morning and a report published by Gallup, I have it here today, with hundreds of case studies of people that they have spoken to on their helpline services in the last few years. Appalling abuse that is happening right now in this country, and the examples I used in my speech earlier on today, from those examples, people being threatened with rape and assault, people being beaten because of their identity in an attempt to change them. So the evidence is very clearly there. And I would just say to the Honourable Lady, one case of abuse is too many. I would also say categorically to the Honourable Lady that in the cases that she mentions, which steered widely clear of the actual remit of this legislation before us today, in the case of a mother helping a child, that is categorically not captured in this bill. In the case of an exploratory therapist helping somebody understand their identity and take time and asking supportive questions, that is categorically not included in this bill. There's a healthcare exemption on the face of the bill to ensure that we do not have a chilling effect on healthcare professionals providing this vital service to young people and indeed any person. They're legitimate questions, and I am answering them today. She asks me about the pre-leg scrutiny process. It will be a joint committee of both houses, and I really look forward, and I genuinely mean I want to have cross-party and good conversation about this legislation, and I hope that her party engages in that in good spirits in the way that I intend to engage in that process. She asks me about the principle of informed consent, and we're talking about a criminal threshold for an abusive practice, a criminal threshold which is in line with other forms of criminal abuse, so domestic abuse, for example. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think you can consent to abuse, and that is a fundamental principle that I think it is right that moves forward in this legislation. She asks other questions about the interaction of this law when it becomes a law, about how that interacts with other safeguarding requirements or guidance in schools. These are all very important questions and ones that we will, of course, address in detail as we get to the point where we have a piece of legislation on the statute book. I do welcome her engagement, but I would just remind her that she says that she stands against abuse. I would urge her and her party to think again. This is a bill which fills a gap in the law to stop the most abhorrent and pernicious abuse faced by LGBT people in our country, and I would urge her to change her mind.
Dame Griffith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, well, I warmly congratulate the Minister on publishing this bill today, and I very much welcome this fully trans-inclusive bill to ban abhorrent conversion practices. Now, whilst the bill will enable the punishment of those who carry out these abusive practices, the real value of the bill will be as a deterrent to stop anybody being subject to these practices in the first place. So what plans does the Minister have to develop a real understanding of this bill, particularly amongst the communities where these practices are now prevalent?
I thank my honourable friend for her question, and if I may, I would also like to thank her for everything that she did when she held my role to get us to the position today that we are now, where we're able to publish this draft legislation. She did a great service in her role, and I'm very grateful to her for it. She is right that the value of this bill is actually quite a simple statement of intent and principle to the LGBT community, which is that there's nothing wrong with who you are. That it's not okay for somebody to forcibly try and change you, to abuse you, to harm you. And I think that's a really important message that this place sends out to the country and to people who are in these terrible situations, feeling fear and shame. So I thank her again for her contribution.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Jess Brown-Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We in the Liberal Democrats welcome the draft bill laid before the House today because conversion therapy is not a thing of the past. 1 in 6 LGBTQ+ young people today have been offered it in an attempt to cure them, and the Minister referred to the Gallup report, which is a really important piece of reading that I would recommend all members across the House take the time to look at those harrowing testimonies. It has always been a form of abuse and far too often carried out by those in positions of trust, whether it's family members, religious leaders, medical professionals have been conducting this archaic practice. It is offensive and dangerous to suggest that sexual orientation or gender identity is a problem to be treated or cured. As far back as 2018, Baroness May, the former Prime Minister, promised to end these abhorrent practices which can cause mental and physical harm. This position was also adopted by the Labour government, who promised legislation to address it in the first King's Speech. Since those initial promises were made, individuals from LGBTQ+ communities have continued to face abuse and discrimination under the guise that they can be cured for years. We should all celebrate finally seeing this legislation that ends this horrendous practice, protecting vulnerable individuals and allowing people to live freely as themselves. On these benches, we are ready to scrutinise the draft to make sure that it is comprehensive and inclusive, and work cross-party on this issue to ensure that legislation can be put into law as soon as possible. We would ask the Minister today to lay out a timeline for this legislation, especially given current uncertainty surrounding the administration, and ask what engagement the Minister is having specifically with representatives of the LGBTQ+ community, so they can ensure that the legislation is shaped with them, not for them. And does she agree with me that France, Canada, New Zealand, Norway, many other countries have already passed legislation to ban this practice? The UK has fallen significantly down the inclusivity league tables, and today marks an important step in reversing that decline and establishing the UK as a world leader in being a safe society for all to live in.
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady very much for her statement and her questions, and grateful for her party's support for the principle of this legislation, and look forward to engaging with you further as we go through the process of pre-leg scrutiny. She asks me a few questions on the timeline for the legislation. We will set up a joint committee of both houses as soon as possible. That process tends to take around 12 sitting weeks, I think, is the average. And obviously that committee, once it is established, will be able to set out more details. We will then press on as fast as we can to make sure that we can get this bill onto the statute book through the legislative process. And, you know, I am also would like to emphasise to the Honourable Lady that this is a manifesto commitment for this government, and it's a commitment which we will continue to adhere to. On representations and engagement with the LGBTQ+ community, I've had many wonderful conversations with them already as I've gone about designing this legislation, and will continue to do so. And I had an event earlier this morning, the ability to thank those organisations for the work that they have done over many years to campaign for this ban, and in particular to thank those who have come forward with their own stories of the appalling abuse that they suffered, and to thank them for having the courage and the bravery to share their stories so that others may not have to experience the same fate. She mentions legislation in other countries, and I think there is now 28 conversion practice bans around the globe. And we have been able to learn from the wonderful experiences those countries have had and the approaches that they have taken in the development of our legislation today, which has been very useful. And she also points to the league tables, and I would say to her, we are hosting the IDHOT Plus Forum in London next year, which I am very excited about, and of course hope and expect that we will climb back up those tables.
Tanya Antoniassi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to take the time to thank the Minister for talking to me in advance of this statement and the publishing of the bill. Just one quick question, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just wanted to know, on reading the bill, if the symmetry in the bill allows detransitioners to bring retrospective cases against therapists and professionals who transitioned them using that affirmative approach, which was in use at GIDS and is still prevalent in many settings today.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question and for her conversations with me on this important topic. So let me just be clear what the bill does. The bill is symmetrical in its approach, in that it is going to be an abusive, the legislation is that you cannot have an abusive conversion practice to attempt to change somebody from one gender identity to another or from one sexual orientation to another. I've also been clear that the criminal threshold in the bill is three things. First of all, you must have an intent to change somebody. Second of all, it must be an abusive practice. That's in line with other legislation, including the Domestic Abuse Act. And third, that must have caused significant harm. And that is the test that will be used by the courts when determining if prosecutions should be brought.
Rebecca Paul.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for her statement, and I think one of the things that I'm concerned about, which she has touched on, is the impact on families, and I think I'm worried that there is scope for positive, healthy interactions within a family to potentially fall into this bill. It's good to hear from the Minister that she thinks the bill won't do that. However, when I look at the bill, I feel like it's quite broadly written, and I'm sure we will have further conversations about that. But I do have one specific question for you on this. So if a child wants to transition and wants to participate in the Pathways clinical trial, and if their parents don't consent, will that be an abusive conversion practice under this bill?
So I am clear that this bill will not impact the ability for families to, or parents to parent how they wish. And I think that the abuse threshold that I have set out several times now this afternoon is really clear on that fact. And I will just repeat it one more time. There has to be an intent to change. There has to be abuse. And the abuse that we have defined in this legislation mirrors the abuse in the Domestic Abuse Act. And thirdly, there has to be serious harm. And it is not the case that there are exemptions for parents in any other form of abuse that takes place in a family relationship, and I don't think it's appropriate if abuse is taking place for that exemption to be in place here.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate my honourable friend for bringing forward this draft bill and for all her work she's put into it. Growing up as a gay person in the early 90s, I know what it's like to feel like you are not normal and don't belong. There are some, particularly Reform UK, who aren't in their place, and seemingly, by the words of the Shadow Minister today, the Tories, who would take us back to the days of Section 28. So does she agree with me that alongside this draft bill that prevents the evil practice of conversion therapy, we too must also protect the freedoms of the LGBTQ+ community to be their authentic selves in our society?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question and all the work that he has done to campaign for those freedoms. I would say to him, I reflect myself when considering this legislation on the impact of experiences that I have had growing up as a young lesbian and the impact that that shame has on me. And I cannot even begin to comprehend how that feels if you've been subject to this kind of abuse. And I think that's one of the really important reasons that we must act to prevent it. I would also say to him that absolutely this Labour government is committed to defending and extending the rights of LGBT people everywhere. I'm proud that we've equalised the hate crime laws, and I'm really proud that we've put in this draft bill before the House today.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also congratulate the Minister on this bill, which has been a long time coming. As someone who sat here in 2018 and heard the then Prime Minister Theresa May promise that there would be a conversion ban. It seems that that promise was almost impossible for the Conservative Party to live up to. And finally, at last, we have it coming from a Labour government. The timing, I think, is important and reflected in what she said about sending a clear message to the LGBTQ+ community that they will be respected and protected. But I think it also sends a message, and I wonder if she would agree with this, to those in this place and beyond who seem determined not to protect the rights of the LGBTQ+ community, and make it absolutely clear that Parliament will do everything it can to ensure that they are free to live the lives that they want as the people they are.
Minister.
I thank her very much for her question and for her support for this draft bill, and I look forward to engaging with her further on it. I do think it's absolutely vital that we continue to defend and protect LGBT rights in our country and, of course, around the world, where we have a proud role to play too. And that is something which I am committed to doing, and this government is committed to doing, with our equalisation of the hate crime laws and with this draft bill.
Alex Barris-Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to congratulate all campaigners who've brought us to this moment, including my honourable friends for Llanelli and the Minister, who has really spearheaded this in the few months she's been in the job, and she should be really proud of what she's achieved with this, because I've spoken to her about it extensively, and the community of victims have, as has been said, been waiting 8 years for this since it was first promised by a Conservative government, because people don't need fixing, they're not broken. Abuse is not and should never be permissible, and so abusive conversion practices should be outlawed, and it really shouldn't be a controversial topic. So will she tell me about the work that she is going to be doing on this with devolved administrations? Because whilst of course this is England and Wales, we need to be looking at Scotland and Northern Ireland and what best practice they can do in order to ensure that there are no victims here, because as she said, consent to abuse is not a thing, should never be a thing, and we should get this law on the statute books as quickly as possible.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question and for his support and engagement on this important topic. He is, of course, right that abuse is never acceptable wherever we find it, and this is a really important piece of legislation to make that completely clear. And to be clear, LGBT people at the moment are subject to that abuse because we have not legislated in this area, and legislate we must. I would say on his question about devolved administrations, we are now going into the process of pre-legislative scrutiny, and I hope very much that conversations with the devolved administrations will be very productive in that period, and we look forward to working with whoever wants to work with us to make this legislation a reality.
Lisa Smart.
Speaker, I really welcome the Minister's statement today and the introduction of this draft legislation, and I really look forward to writing to my constituents who've been in touch with me to express their disappointment that conversion practices are still legal. I particularly mention Isabel from Offerton, who is the most recent constituent to write to me about this. I wonder if the Minister could say a little bit more. She mentioned the carve-out for health professionals in her opening remarks, and how she sees mitigating the risk that somebody under the guise of being a health professional might set up a mental health charity in an attempt to circumvent the aims of this bill.
Yeah. Minister.
Thank you for the question. This is a really important question, and let me explain how it will work. So, it is my view that legitimate healthcare would not fall under the remits of this bill in any way, shape or form, because legitimate healthcare would never be abusing somebody to try and change their identity and causing them serious harm. However, I do recognise the concerns that I have heard about the risk of a chilling effect. We don't want that, because therapy and good conversation is really important. That's why we've put this exemption on the face of the bill. But I'm also clear that if somebody falls below the standards that would be expected of them in a healthcare profession, they will fall within this bill. So that would prevent the example which she outlines, where somebody is pretending to be a healthcare professional in order to do an abusive conversion practice. So I am confident that there is no loophole here, but it is just a clear statement that healthcare professionals can continue to do their important work.
Danny Beales.
Madam Deputy Speaker, today has been a long time coming. I'd like to thank the Minister for her hard, relentless and committed work in delivering this comprehensive and inclusive draft bill today, which we were promised in 2018. It's been in 4 King and Queen speeches, and the LGBT community will rightly welcome today.
And jobs to East Lothian. What reassurances can be given to investors that the Scottish Government will work with them to deliver on the project? Cabinet Secretary.
So along with my ministerial colleagues, as I mentioned in my original answer, we do recognise the strategic importance of blind wells and the importance not just to housing but to the East Lothian economy. On the 25th of March, the former Cabinet Secretary for Housing wrote to the Chief Executive of East Lothian Council and confirming the Scottish Government's commitment to support the outlined business case, and my officials will continue to prioritise working with East Lothian Council and others, acting in as pragmatic and positive partner in this project as we can.
Question 5, David Barrett.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on Police Scotland's review of the deployment of forensic tagging spray, including when it expects a decision on its future operational use.
Minister Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I can confirm for David Barrett that forensic tagging sprays can invisibly and harmlessly mark a person or a vehicle or a property with a unique ID code. And the use of this kind of technology is, of course, an operational matter for the Chief Constable, but I can confirm that it is being used in different parts of the country, including the North East Division, and the member may be aware it's also going to be introduced in Fife Division. And that technology can be used both as a deterrent but also as a forensic aid. And Police Scotland has commenced a comprehensive review of its use and to consider the potential benefits it has for prevention, for intervention and detection, as well as looking at operational issues. The conclusions of that review are expected before the end of the year.
David Barrett.
I thank the Minister for that response. Forensic sprays are just one of the tools available for the scourge of off-road bikes, e-scooters and e-bikes. These items are already illegal to use anywhere but on private land, but they are sold openly and without disclaimers. Does the Scottish Government have the power to ban or further regulate the sale of off-road bikes, e-scooters and e-bikes?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to commend the Cowdenbeath community, actually, who I know are working hard with the police for their actions here. And on the point that David Barrett makes, the regulation of sales of these items is reserved. However, we have consistently pressed for greater engagement with the UK Government so that we can work together to address this kind of vehicle-related crime. That includes calling for progress on the registration of off-road vehicles. Progress so far has been limited, unfortunately. However, we will continue to press for further action. Of course, that complements the work that Police Scotland are doing. They've undertaken campaigns to improve awareness of where and how these vehicles can be used responsibly, alongside the steps that the responsible retailers should be taking. And I would assure David Barrett that we will continue to press the UK Government to put the registration of off-road vehicles in place as part of managing safe and responsible use.
To ask the Scottish Government when it plans to renew its strategy on preventing knife crime, particularly among young people.
Minister Kirsten Oswald.
I'm grateful to Pauline McNeill. This is an important question she asked, and I would say to her that a new strategy to prevent violence is currently being developed with key stakeholders, including the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit. That will be published later this year, and that strategy will aim at preventing violence from happening in the first instance, and when it does occur, it will focus on reducing further harm. I would add that the principles of the Scottish Government's violence prevention framework do remain embedded in our funded activity for 2026-27. We're providing over £2 million this year to organisations to take forward a range of preventative actions, meaning support for this activity totals £8 million plus since 2023. And I would add that members may have heard the Cabinet Secretary for Justice noting that he was willing to explore all options in this regard.
Paul Menial.
This month, 3 teenagers were convicted of murdering Caden Moy at Irvine Beach last May, but it's just an example. But the superintendent in that case, Graham Gailey, said that violent crime among young people is falling, but that weapon carrying is on the rise. And this is the point that I think the Scottish Government need to think about in their strategy. He said that through our stop and search activity, they've noticed that weapon carrying is on the increase, especially amongst teenagers. But we know some of them carry it because they want to feel safe. I've had some conversations with the legal profession.
Please ask a question, actually, because we're trying to get a lot of people in here, and it's, you know, people, the idea is to ask questions and get answers. Please ask a question.
But it's a substantial point, Presiding Officer, that I'm trying to get across, but to give the background, and I will.
I want the background. I want a question, actually, please.
But I've got to get a chance to set the context. OK, I'll ask the question. Have you spoken to has the government spoken to the legal profession who have defended boys about how, in fact, we can take a different approach to explain to young people the implications for their life? I'm really asking the Scottish Government, maybe we need to think about a refresh of their policy.
I appreciate the importance that the member is placing on this issue. It's a matter that is, of course, of concern to all of us, and we're all, I think, equally invested in making sure that the prevention focus that the government has at the heart of its work is something that is absolutely embedded through everything that we are doing in this place. I have spoken about the new strategy that is being developed. Obviously, we have the existing strategy in place. And I would just add that, of course, the vast majority of young people are not engaged in this area, but we do need to have a focus on how we prevent. And as I indicated earlier, the Cabinet Secretary has stated in the last week or so that he is willing to look at all options here, and that would include, if appropriate, a knife amnesty.
Don Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Ensuring that Scotland's communities remain a safe place to live is absolutely crucial, which is why we must invest in early intervention to target those at risk of engaging in crime. So can the Minister advise how this is reflected as a priority in the Scottish Government's approach to tackling knife crime?
Minister.
I'm grateful to Dawn Black for the question and also for her focus on the vital importance of our communities being and feeling safe places to live. We do know that the consequences of knife crime can be devastating. That's why we continue to invest in violence prevention programmes, and particularly in early intervention programmes aimed at children and young people. Things like education programmes on the danger and the unacceptability of carrying a knife. For example, the YouthLink Scotland programme, No Lives, Better Lives. That training has provided information to hundreds of frontline practitioners, particularly looking at young people. Of course, there are consequences when offences are committed, and the final element is sustained school and community engagement with young people, for instance, through Police Scotland youth volunteers, to make sure that we do have that focus on prevention and creating responsible citizens.
Stephen Kerr.
Why have ministers not delivered the level of proactive policing that's needed to disrupt knife carrying before lives are even put at risk, rather than relying on investigations after another incident has happened?
Minister.
I'm grateful to Stephen Kerr for his question, but I would point him to some of the previous answers that I have given. There needs to be a holistic approach to this. It is a very serious issue, but I have outlined significant elements of the prevention focus, which is part of our approach and a crucial part of our approach. It will take prevention as well as detection, consequences and education if we are to deal effectively and sustainably with this issue.
Question 7, David Kirkwood.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government, following the First Minister's commitment on 26th of May regarding the opening of new railway stations, when it will publish details of the potential locations and the development timetables.
Minister Tom Arthur.
As the First Minister set out, the Scottish Government will invest in essential infrastructure across Scotland, including new train stations and ongoing electrification of our rail network. We will advance consideration of a new railway to Ellon, Peterhead and Fraserburgh, and are currently examining the case for a link from Tweedbank to Carlisle. We will also deliver a station at Winchborough, as set out in the budget 26-27. We are committed to improving Scotland's rail network, as is clearly demonstrated by our delivery of a publicly owned, modernised rail service with improved reliability and accessibility.
David Kirkwood.
Thank you for that answer. Given the opening of the River Tweed Trail, the long-distance path in 2028, which will start in Moffat, the jewel of the south, and run 113 miles to Berwick-on-Tweed, and the probable extension of the Clydesdale Way into Moffat a few years later, it's likely that more than 300,000 additional cyclists and walkers will be visiting a town annually, putting a huge strain on the ability to cope with road traffic. So, will the Minister work with me to urgently advance the Beattock Station Action Group's plan to reopen what could be one of the busiest small stations on the network?
Minister.
I can thank the member for his supplementary, and I'm aware of his particular interest. I'm advised that Transport Scotland officials responded to Suez Trans in June 2023 to confirm that the outcome of their review of Suez Transi's BTIC and Moffat Transport Appraisal Report was that a robust business case had not been made for a BTIC station to progress further in the development process. And while I commend the work done by Suez Trans, the Action Group and the local community, Suez Trans's own transport appraisal report clearly acknowledged, for example, that the option of a rail station at BTIC simply did not, in their words, stack up from an economic perspective. But I appreciate the member raising the point.
Supplementary, Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given the fragility of bus services across Dumfriesshire, will the Minister commit the Cabinet Secretary to a meeting with me whilst he is overseas in order that I can reinforce the case for a station at BTIC, which is now increasingly vital given the fragility of bus services in my constituency?
Minister.
Well, I appreciate the member inviting me to compel the Cabinet Secretary, but I'd be more than happy to relay the member's request on to the Cabinet Secretary.
Question 8, Laura Moody.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the operation of the Accessible Vehicles and Equipment Scheme, including whether any of the changes to the UK Motability Scheme, such as reduced mileage allowances, increased excess mileage charges and changes to lease conditions, will apply to people using the scheme in Scotland, and if so, when?
Cabinet Secretary Shelley Somerville.
The Scottish Government has been working closely with Motability since March, and its notification of changes from 1st July in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. The 1st July commencement is not set to apply in Scotland. These changes by Motability are a direct consequence of the UK Government's decision for a removal of tax exemptions on Motability vehicles in the November 2025 budget. Since that announcement, I have raised concerns with the UK Government, ministers and Motability, particularly for customers living in rural and island communities. Our discussions with Motability have focused on understanding how the removal of those tax exemptions might affect our Accessible Vehicles and Equipment Scheme, and customers will be notified about any changes as soon as possible.
Laura Moody.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but does she recognise the distress being caused to constituents, including a disabled veteran in my region, by the continued uncertainty around the scheme? And will the Scottish Government commit to a clear timetable and consultation process so that people in Scotland are not left in limbo about a service that is critical to their independence, access to work and family life?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I do recognise that distress, and that's exactly why I raised it with UK Government ministers who don't appear to have looked at this at all before they made their decision in the last budget. Can I commend Motability for their willingness to work with the Scottish Government to not put these measures in place from the 1st of July, but to continue to work with the Scottish Government to see what can be done, because they also recognise the distress and inconvenience this will be causing. I can reassure the member that the reason that this is not happening on the 1st of July is because Motability is keen to work with the Scottish Government to see whether we can work together to make sure that we are doing as much as we can to support those Motability customers. And I would give her that reassurance is important because, as I said at the start, I do very much recognise the distress which has been caused by UK Government decisions in their budget.
Question 9, Kate Evans.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it will take to provide sanitation facilities for the traveller community living on land that it owns in Granton in Edinburgh.
Minister Sumita Kumar.
Can I thank Kate Evans for her question? We of course expect local authorities to take the lead in responding to unauthorised encampments, including consideration of welfare needs such as access to sanitation facilities. The Government is of course fulfilling its legal obligations as landowner by taking steps to secure the clearance of unauthorised encampments, and we recognise the significant health and safety risks facing those on the site, but also in the local community. We will of course continue to engage with partners, including the local authority.
Kate Evans.
Will the Scottish Government also look to address the ongoing issue of fly tipping on the wider site that is causing distress to local residents and is being incorrectly attributed to traveller communities?
Minister.
Crucial to point out, fly tipping is a criminal offence and local authorities have enforcement powers to address it alongside wider action at national level to reduce illegal dumping and protect local environments. This is a local authority responsibility, but we will continue to work with local authorities to get waste uplift done. Thanks.
Question 10, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the importance of community cohesion and resilience, including the role that local galas play in promoting this.
Minister Sumita Kumar.
Can I thank Colin Beattie for this important and relevant question? Community cohesion, of course, remains a core priority for the Scottish Government, recognising that trust, connection and inclusion underpin resilient communities and a flourishing Scotland for all. Gala days and local celebrations showcase communities at their very best. It brings people together in inclusive and welcoming spaces to build relationships and celebrate our shared identity.
Colin Beattie.
Does the Minister agree that local galas, many of which have their roots in historic mining communities, continue to play an important role in modern society through preserving cultural traditions, including pipe bands, and by bringing together people of all ages and backgrounds? Will she join me in celebrating the galas held across my constituency of Midlothian North as excellent examples of communities coming together at a time when community cohesion is more important than ever?
Minister.
Thank you for the supplementary. Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Celebratory events bring local communities together, and it will always play a vital role in modern Scotland. They are a powerful expression of community spirit, bringing people together to celebrate their local areas and share that, again, sense of belonging. So I will absolutely join the member in welcoming gala events in his constituency.
Brief supplementary, Jenny Young.
Tomorrow, people in Bo'ness will come together for the most important day on the town's calendar, the Bo'ness Fair. Now, there has long been a friendly rivalry between my hometown of Linlithgow and neighbouring Bo'ness. So in that spirit of community cohesion, will the Minister join me in wishing Queen-elect Holly, the full retinue from the Grange School and the whole town a really successful fair day tomorrow?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Jenny Young, for your supplementary. I probably won't comment on the rivalry between Bo'ness and Linlithgow, but of course I will welcome the celebration in your local community.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That concludes general questions for today. The next item of business is First Minister's questions for party leaders. And of course, it's slightly different this week because question 1 is for Alex Cole-Hamilton. And I call Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, I'm sure everyone in this chamber will join me in expressing solidarity with Scotland's Muslim community after the brutal and unprovoked attacks on the streets of Edinburgh last weekend. That community's response to those attacks has not been one of violence or revenge. It has been a plea for tolerance and for understanding. And in a society where that feels increasingly rare, we would all do well to listen to them. Presiding Officer, new figures show that violent crime is up by 4,000 incidents last year. Crimes of dishonesty were up by 7,000. Of course, one of those has dominated the front pages this week. But while everyone is focused on Scotland's prison population growing by 1 in recent days, I want to ask about those leaving our jails. All told, over 1,400 inmates have been let out since the early release scheme began, because our prisons are bursting at the seams. But this isn't a strategy, nor will it protect the public. So can I ask the First Minister, how many of those who were released early went on to reoffend, and how many of them are already back behind bars?
First Minister.
So first of all, can I associate myself unreservedly with the comments that Mr Cole-Hamilton made about the feelings in the Muslim community? On Monday, I visited the Broomhouse Mosque, along with Sumita Kumar, and the Andale Street Mosque in Edinburgh with Ben McPherson. And of course, the Broomhouse Mosque is twinned with the Blackhall Mosque, which I think is probably in Mr Cole-Hamilton's constituency. If not, it is very close by. The feeling of unease is palpable in the community, and as I indicated in my answers on Tuesday, I met young men who were the victims of the attacks last Friday, and my heart goes out to them for the trauma and the physical injury that they have suffered. And I reiterate my absolute wholehearted commitment to give the leadership in Scotland to ensure that we live in a tolerant and inclusive country at all times. In relation to the prison population, as Parliament is aware, because the Government has been very transparent with Parliament over the course of the last 2.5 years, the prison population has been rising significantly. The Government has taken forward, with parliamentary consent, measures which have resulted in the early release of certain prisoners, although there are significant exemptions in place. And the Justice Secretary will lead a debate on the prison population and our strategy in response to the sentencing, the Penal Commission's report that we received before the election later on this afternoon. I don't have the details about reoffending in front of me, but I'm happy to write to Mr Cole-Hamilton on that point.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm grateful for that reply. We can be sure it isn't zero, and for as long as we don't have a proper strategy around prison capacity, around rehabilitation and around clearing down the court's backlog, and then early release will be in a revolving door with people going in and out and back into our prisons. Our justice system, presiding officer, is in crisis. So we need that strategy, and Lib Dems will of course play our part in that. But we also need to use the tools that we have right now. Presiding officer, sexual crime is the highest it's been since 1971. Rape crisis describes that as shameful and sharp. And many of those assaults will have been committed by a partner. Yet the domestic abuse protections that this Parliament agreed to 5 years ago are still not in place. So can I ask the First Minister, when will his government stop dragging its feet, act on the will of this Parliament and restore the public's faith in our broken justice system?
First Minister.
I'm advised that the figures on return to custody, which is not quite the same point that Mr Cole-Hamilton is putting to me, is in the first tranche of the prisoner release scheme 13% and in the second tranche 5%. But I will furnish him with more details on this question. I share his concern about the reporting and the pursuit of sexual crime because no women should be subjected to sexual crimes and to domestic violence, and the Government has in place, and we've passed legislation to address these issues. There has, of course, been a very significant increase in reporting of sexual crime and domestic violence, and very substantial increases in prosecution. That's why the prison population, that is one of the factors why the prison population is so high. So, although not all of the measures that were being passed by Parliament have been commenced, I don't think it's a fair characterisation to say the Government has been dragging its heels. But I assure Mr Cole-Hamilton that the Government is entirely focused on making sure that women and girls are protected in our society, and that we have, as the recently retired Lord Advocate demonstrated, a very, very front-footed approach to ensuring the pursuit of sexual crime, and that will always be the case in this Government.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. I begin by congratulating Douglas Lumsden on his election as MP for Aberdeen South and welcoming our new MSP colleague James Adams to Holyrood today. Also here today are former members of the SNP's Audit and Finance Committee. At the height of Peter Murrow's crime spree, Alison Graham and Cynthia Guthrie raised concerns. Nicola Sturgeon ordered them to be quiet. John Swinney assured them there was no problem. The new Victims Minister tried to bully these whistleblowers into silence, and they back an inquiry because their testimony proves beyond any doubt that John Swinney and others enabled Peter Murrow's crimes. So will he apologise to them for his central role in this SNP scandal?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, first of all, can I congratulate Douglas Lumsden on his election to the House of Commons. It will be a very exciting moment for Mr Lumsden, and I wish him well in the arduous responsibilities, particularly in the tabling of written parliamentary questions. Can I extend a warm welcome to James Adams and express my apologies that I was not here, as I should have been, for his swearing-in, but I was detained on other government business. But I wish Mr Adams a warm welcome to Parliament, and I wish him well in his parliamentary engagement on behalf of the people of the North East of Scotland. Now, Presiding Officer, I have apologised to members of the Scottish National Party for the events that have affected the party's finances, and I reiterate that apology today. But the comments that Russell Finlay makes about me are baseless, utterly and totally baseless. but we've become accustomed to that from Russell Finlay.
Russell Finlay.
So, as expected, no apology to the whistleblowers. The truth is, Peter Murrow should never have been free to commit these crimes. Members of the SNP Finance and Audit Committee blew the whistle, but they were bullied into quitting after being refused access to basic information. John Swinney twice went on to the BBC to say that his party's finances were completely sound. He was at the heart of the cover-up then and now. And that's why he's terrified of an inquiry, because John Swinney, the king of the SNP cover-up, is desperate to cover his own back. Isn't that the simple truth?
First Minister.
President, Russell Finlay has gone on about the need for an inquiry into all these issues. This must be the first time in living memory that Russell Finlay, who's championed the interests of victims, wants an inquiry into the victim of this particular case. Now, I would simply say to Mr Finlay to give him a reassurance about the issues about which he's concerned, that I've addressed the issues in the SNP's finances, and the SNP has got strong governance in place. But I think Russell Finlay should pay slightly more attention to some of the things that have been said about him. Because in the newspapers this morning, a much respected...
Excuse me, let's hear the answer to Mr Finlay's question.
Much respected former Conservative MSP, Edward Mountain, described Russell Finlay as a disaster. His leadership has been catastrophic. As we have just seen, he called out Russell Finlay's...
Can we allow the First Minister to answer, please? Quieten down.
He called out Russell Finlay's robotic delivery and lack of empathy. He thought that Mr Finlay would consign the party to the wilderness. Well, on the basis of the Scottish Parliamentary elections, Mr Finlay is well on the road to the wilderness of Scotland.
Sorry. Can we allow the next party leader to ask a question? Thank you. Gillian Mackay.
Since we last raised the issue of hyperscale data centres with the First Minister last week, over 6,000 people have written to him to back the Scottish Greens' call for a moratorium. Hundreds of those people gathered outside Parliament yesterday to make their voices heard. Communities are rightly worried about the local environmental impacts and the massive strain on our energy system these applications could bring. And now Antonio Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, has joined the call, saying that AI data centres are hungry for land, water and power, and calling for every major AI company to publicly disclose the full environmental impact of its systems. Will the First Minister stand with communities across Scotland and the head of the UN in taking on big tech, or will he continue to allow a free-for-all on hyperscale data centres?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, as I said last week, I understand the concerns that have been raised here about the environmental impact and the impact on energy resources that are emerging from the proliferation of applications for hyperscale data centres. So I totally understand that concern, and I made that point clear last week. Now, I've been reflecting on the exchanges last week and looked further at this issue, and I'm giving active consideration to whether the Scottish Government should provide planning guidance to balance the rapid expansion of hyperscale data centres with national energy and climate goals, which are vital to our future prosperity.
Gillian Mackay.
I'm pleased to hear that the First Minister is considering that, because councils themselves are saying they don't have the necessary guidance to decide on these mega plans. Fife Council has confirmed the Scottish Government is looking at whether an environmental impact assessment is needed for the Auditor Tool application, because it's not clear enough from existing guidance. That comes on top of Edinburgh councillors saying they can't make a decision on local applications until the Scottish Government comes up with what a definition of what exactly a green data centre is. If the First Minister is considering this pause, what timescale are we going to see it on to make sure that we can take this overview of these applications?
First Minister.
The first thing I have to say is that I have to compartmentalise my comments and not comment on the Auditor Tool application because it's a live application. But on the general policy questions, I appreciate the urgency of this question because there are a number of applications that are now being considered by planning authorities, and my view is that with the concerns being expressed by planning authorities, the government has to be responsive to that. And as I rehearsed last week with Mr Greer, there is a careful balance that has to be struck between the extent and specificity of national guidance and the discretion available for local decision-making. Now, if the balance of that is not correct in this issue, then obviously that has to be examined by the government. But I give a commitment to Gillian Mackay that that will be undertaken as a matter of priority by the government, and obviously planning authorities will hear what I'm saying in Parliament today and will be able to reflect on my comments.
Gillian Mackay.
I appreciate that response from the First Minister, but local issues aside, the most significant impact of all of these data centres is the combined energy use. If all 24 applications were approved, they will use up to 1.5 times our peak energy use for the whole of Scotland. If the Government's position is that councils should be able to make these decisions locally, they can't. How are we supposed to possibly get a handle on those combined energy impacts? How many do we have capacity for? Because at the moment we simply don't know. Councils can't make these decisions in a coordinated way and planned way without the Scottish Government stepping in. The Scottish Government has that responsibility to provide councils with guidance, communities with certainty, and they need that pause that we are asking for. So while that guidance comes forward for the First Minister, will he announce a pause on these applications?
First Minister.
Gillian Mackay asks me to do, or for the Government to preside over two very different things. She asks me on the one hand to enable local authorities to take decisions that will be cognizant and compatible with energy requirements within the country, but expects local authorities to do that in a coordinated and organised fashion around the whole of the country. Now, those two things I don't think are possible at the same time, which is why I have to explore whether it is appropriate for such decision-making to be undertaken at local level, given the scale of the developments that are involved. So, for example, when it comes to large-scale renewable energy projects, at a certain level and scale of application that is called into the government is not called into the government, it automatically defers to the government. Now, what has been raised here is quite a fundamental reshaping of the planning policy of our country and the way in which decisions are taken. Now, I'm prepared to consider that and contemplate that. I've been trying to give as helpful answers as I possibly can do this afternoon on this question, because I recognise the public concern, and I assure Gillian Mackay that all of these issues about local and national decision-making and the implications for energy use will be fully considered in the exercise that I am prepared to undertake.
Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Before I begin, can I join others in condemning the appalling anti-Muslim attack in Edinburgh? No Scot should live in fear, and every Scot should live in safety. And our thoughts are with those who were injured and with the wider Muslim community. And I want to put on record my thanks to all the emergency services who responded so quickly and effectively. I think we should say loudly and clearly from this Parliament and across the country that an attack on one, whether it's individual or one community, is an attack on all of us, and hate has no place in our Scotland. Presiding Officer, this week also marks Armed Forces Week, so can I place on record my thanks to all those who have served and continue to serve in the service of keeping our great country safe. Presiding Officer, today Audit Scotland published their report on the Government's progress with the reform of post-school education and skills, and it is damning. It says the sector faces significant challenges, that the government lacks a clear plan and that reforms have not been adequately resourced, and there is a risk they will not achieve the intended outcomes. In 2022, Audit Scotland concluded that the SNP government had not provided the necessary leadership on skills reform. 4 years on, and not much has changed, which has consequences, because every year that passes, more pupils leave school without the opportunities they deserve. So does John Swinney accept the findings of this report, and can he say how many more cohorts of young people will be let down before this government finally gets his act together?
First Minister.
First of all, President Officer, let me associate myself entirely with the comments that Mr Sarwar has made about the Muslim community and about the necessity for all of us to stand together in the face of the spreading of hate in our society. And in the disputatious world of politics, I'm glad and I'm not in any way surprised that Mr Sarwar and I are in exactly the same position on that question. And also let me pay tribute to the members of the armed forces for the service and commitment that they give. We obviously have a parliamentary event on Saturday, which is the occasion of Armed Forces Day, and I commend everyone who will be involved in Armed Forces Day commemorations around the country. Now, I welcome the report from Audit Scotland because it is important that these vital issues are the subject of active debate. The Government, since the work was carried out and the report was carried out several years ago, has of course presided over the passage of legislation to rationalise this area of activity, and there is work underway to transfer the responsibility for the funding of further education student support from the Funding Council to the Student Awards Agency. There has also been strong progress in skills planning, with the introduction of a new model for skills planning in Scotland, and the Scottish Government moving into a leadership role which comes out of that legislation as proposed by James Withers. And we have also begun the work on this post-school education and skills reform programme commencing in January 2026 to address many of the issues raised by Audit Scotland. The other point I would make is that and one of the key outcomes here is about the destinations for young people when they leave school. And on the most recent figures available, 93.5% of young people were in a positive destination, which was an increase from 93.1% in the previous year, which is the joint highest since records ever began. So, although there are issues that must be addressed in the Audit Scotland report, the general position of our young people leaving school going on to a positive destination, which is surely the most important measure of this exercise, the Government is pleased that we are in a strong position in that respect.
Anna Sarwar.
President Officer, it's important that we measure not where our young people are weeks or months after they leave school, but years after school, because that's what impacts on their life outcomes. And our young people are the future of our country, so they must be supported to achieve their ambitions. That means no one right path after school, whether it be university, college, apprenticeship or work. But that is not the reality under this SNP government, because shockingly Scotland has one of the highest rates of young people not in work, education or training, as many as 1 in 6. And that's not helped by the SNP government cutting 20% in real terms from college budgets in the last 5 years, or in failing to meet its promises on apprenticeship numbers. And the data for 25-26 shows that apprenticeship starts fell below 25,000, the lowest number for over a decade, excluding the period of the pandemic. So if we are serious about ensuring every young person has a chance to succeed, then the system has to change. So will John Swinney commit today that every young person who is qualified for an apprenticeship will have the guarantee of being able to access one?
First Minister.
So on a couple of points that Mr Sarwar raised, in relation to college funding, the Government increased in the budget that's just been put into practice. The budget for core college funding increased by 10% to £764 million. So we have recognised some of the financial challenges that exist in our college sector. Now, on apprenticeships, we are providing £198 million a year to support 25,500 new modern apprenticeships, 5,000 new foundation apprenticeships and over 1,200 new graduate apprenticeships. Now, this also supports over 39,000 modern apprentices already in training, and we committed in our manifesto to ensuring that we increased the number of apprenticeships to 150,000 over the course of the Parliament. So I'm a huge supporter of apprenticeship programmes. I think the reforms that the government brought in with both foundation apprenticeships and graduate apprenticeships have been really important reforms that the government has brought forward, which create new and successful pathways for young people, and I'm determined to make sure that every young person has that desirable pathway for the future.
So the measure of success is whether young people get the opportunities they deserve and whether our businesses and the economy have the skills supply chain that they need. Because according to the Open University, over half of Scotland's employers say they have a skills shortage. And many of these businesses will pay the apprenticeship levy. And the proceeds of that go to the Scottish Government, but the SNP don't currently ring-fence it to spend on skills. That must change. So that money could be spent on funding new apprenticeships for key sectors, on creating a clearing system for colleges and apprenticeships to help young people find opportunities. And in this Armed Forces Week, it could be used to match the UK Labour Government's commitment to fund and create 2 Defence Technical Excellence Colleges in Scotland. He can make those commitments right now, because we do need to get serious about delivering a modern skills system that meets the needs of Scotland's young people. So will the SNP government not hide behind process and instead focus on delivery? Because it's time we had a government that matched young people's ambition with some ambition of their own.
First Minister.
Well, I think this is one of the issues that I had in mind when I became First Minister after the election, where I said that there was opportunity for us to make progress across the parliamentary chamber. So I think there's a lot of the points that Mr Sarwar has made today about the ideas and the suggestions made, which I think are completely reasonable. And we should embark on these conversations about how we can take that forward. As Mr Sarwar knows, I've rehearsed it frequently in Parliament. The Government doesn't have a majority. We need wider parliamentary support for our programme. I'm delighted on such a number of occasions we are attracting support from other parties for the propositions we're putting to Parliament. So this is one area where we can do exactly that. So I invite, I'm afraid I'm not quite up to speed with the spokespeople deployment of Mr Sarwar's team, but I'm very happy for Ms McCallum, the Education Secretary, and Stephen Flynn, the Economy Secretary, to meet with their counterparts in the Labour Party to see how we can take these serious ideas forward, because what I'm interested in, Mr Sarwar will not be surprised to hear, is delivering for the people of Scotland. I think the Scottish Government is hearing that loud and clear from the First Minister, and I'm delighted to repeat that in Parliament today.
Malcolm Offord. Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the First Minister welcome the recent landmark legal ruling by Lady Ross on the case brought by that excellent organisation for Women Scotland? Will he ensure that it is implemented in full, in letter and in spirit as soon as possible? Will he further ensure that the principles of this ruling are rolled out across the entire public sector, including the NHS, immediately? That would avoid the need for any further waste of taxpayers' money defending the indefensible in court. And further, ensure that informational materials published by activist organisations, which are contrary to the letter and spirit of Lady Ross's ruling, are withdrawn from all public organisations and institutions, and cessation of their production and distribution becomes a condition of any further public funding to these activist groups. Finally, does he share my relief that Isla Bryson, apparently known in prison as Isla Man, will now be retained in a male jail and upon release should not be allowed access to women's toilets, whether here in Holyrood or anywhere in Scotland?
First Minister.
I lead a government that believes in and follows the rule of law. So when issues are of a legally contested nature, we do the proper thing, which is we allow the legally contested debate to take place, and then at the conclusion of that, we follow that legal ruling. So Lady Ross's ruling is crystal clear. It has been implemented in full already in relation to the Scottish Prison Service, and the necessary amendments to custody have taken place. I do not intend to talk about individual cases, because that's inappropriate for me to do that. And in relation to the circulation of materials, materials in guidance have to be compatible with the law as it stands, and that's exactly why the Scottish Prison Service withdrew their guidance at the earliest opportunity, and developments of further guidance will be undertaken consistent with the ruling of Lady Ross.
Malcolm Offord.
I thank the First Minister for that question, which was more comprehensive than I expected. I was dreading that he would come back with a long-winded no comment, which begs the question, is saying no comment ever an acceptable response to a sequence of serious questions? And of course, he will be aware that all this illegal gender policy was implemented by his predecessor, Miss No Comment, who has now fled to London in search of fame and fortune and lower taxes. Is it true that the second edition of Miss Sturgeon's memoirs will be entitled "Frankly, I Don't Give a Damn"? Meanwhile, we have heard that the Miss No Comment is to star in a TV show, playing the role of a Deputy Prime Minister in the UK. Frankly, you couldn't make this up, or is this part of John Swinney's cunning plan? Does the First Minister agree with me that the no comment saga must be part of the forthcoming inquiry into Murrellgate?
First Minister, if you want to have a go at that.
The only person up until now who's ever accused me of being long-winded is my 15-year-old son, who tells me to shorten my answers in Parliament on a regular basis. So I think, for the benefit of currying favour with the presiding officer, I'll keep this one short. Mr Offord's contribution. Oh, it's all very funny, Mr Kerr. You're always laughing at things. Mr Kerr was laughing at the very substantial points made by Daniel Johnson in the debate, where Mr Kerr trivialised the attacks on Muslim members of our community, which is an absolute disgrace. And if anyone who voted reform was watching the exchange, Mr Offord's question to me there just now, I think they would think what a waste of time it was voting for reform, because that was just an insulting lot of drivel from Malcolm Offord.
Malcolm Offord.
It is the last day of term, Presiding Officer. So on the same theme, of course, the items bought by Peter Murrell with money stolen from the SNP are now part of Scotland's political history. And this saga will be taught to future generations of Scotland's children. Will the First Minister arrange for as many items as can be found to be gathered together and displayed as the Murrell collection? Will he also arrange for some items to be gifted to Scotland's museums and galleries as permanent exhibitions and a tribute to SNP governance? Can I suggest that the fountain pen, which Nicola Sturgeon used to sign her resignation letter, should go to the People's Palace to become the People's Pen? Or similarly, the 2 toilet seats could go to Perth to sit alongside the Stone of Destiny? Or the £3,000 coffee machine could sit beside the Declaration of Arbroath to show how political priorities have changed? Will he encourage the people of Scotland to write to us with their proposals? We cannot allow for these items to be auctioned to the highest bidder, who will take them into private collections abroad. So does he agree with me that this part of Scotland's history must not be lost?
First Minister.
No, I'm going to get on with delivering for the people of Scotland.
That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a debate on motion 469 in the name of Neil Gray. We will allow a 2-minute break for a change of places. Thank God.
The next item of business is a debate on motion 469 in the name of Neil Gray on achieving